The world is a big, wonderful place, full of opportunities. No two countries are the same, and no two mobility programs are either. We know the complexities that come with moving employees and their families across borders, both for your business and your relocating employees. We can advise you on how to best develop or modify your mobility program. Whatever the size and needs of your business, we deliver a customized approach. And to simplify everything, we operate through a single point of coordination. From tailored advice to practical support, our robust knowledge of international immigration policy means you can relax. We'll assist in pre-planning, paperwork, visas, and everything else along the way. Our focus is on your compliance. Financial transparency and control are critical to every mobility program success. We can help you with both program budgeting and management of associated costs. We have a full suite of flexible mobility services to enhance all aspects of your program. Together, we can build the best international relocation experience for your employees, their families, and your business. Global in scope, human in scale.
Leadership for me is about empowering people to go out into the world and really make a difference, and I think it's about, I really believe in collaborative leadership, so sort of leading with as sort of flat a base as possible so that everyone's on board as a team with me, delivering the things we need to deliver. I really enjoy building a community around the spaces that I work in and the people that I work with, because I think that's sort of what makes things exciting and valuable to everybody. So I'm learning with people, they're learning with me, we're sort of going through a process together. One of the biggest things for women in leadership is around equality and equivalence, and making sure that they believe in themselves when they go out there and they are really strong about who they are, that they're as good as and equal to everyone else in the environment with them. I think one of the challenges for women is being heard still, sort of unbelievably in a way, but I think that there's still a space for women to step up, make sure that they are part of a community together going forward and saying, you know, we've got something to say. It's important that women are leaders as well, because I think that they bring something different to leadership positions. I think they're very often can be very community focused, very personal and engaging, but also strong about how they lead. First of all, I did the Massey inaugural Women in Leadership program, so it was really nice to be sort of part of the first round of women doing that here. And then I went on and did the New Zealand Women in Leadership program, and they're quite different. There were good crossovers, but the things that I loved about the New Zealand program was meeting women from other tertiary institutes and I guess developing a community around me and meeting incredible women who are doing these sort of amazing things. But also I felt like I gained a mandate that I needed to go out and actually also help younger women in my own tertiary environment, and that there were lots of things that I personally could do to step up, but also share the knowledge and share what I had learnt in the environment. The other things that the Women in Leadership program gave me, I guess, was a set of tools and strategies to be able to deliver on the things that I want to do. It gave me an empowerment to take more risks, I think, be a bit bolder, and go out and try and do the things that I really believe in.
For me personally, I think leadership has different contexts to it. So in my situation, when I first started in the workforce, I joined the military, I was in the Navy. So leadership in that context was quite structured and quite hierarchical, as it should have been. I mean, in a military situation, you very clearly knew who were the leaders and at what level of leadership they were at by looking at the pips on their shoulders. I think if we're talking the context specifically for women, my view has been our own perceptions are often our biggest barrier. And a lot of that also can be traditional values. I mean, I come from I've been very fortunate, I've got a very strong family background, but there are some very strong opinions in that background, and particularly from sort of the second generation woman. And yeah, historically, they haven't seen their role as perhaps having a professional career. I learnt, once again, it's around those sort of traditional barriers that we create ourselves. I learnt to actually look up and think bigger than what was necessarily within my immediate sight. And I was never really narrowly focused, but I perhaps wasn't realizing that you can add value in that wider picture. So it was about actually having a voice within acceptable parameters. So when somebody sent something and said, look, this is open for general comment, I now comment and consider, whereas before perhaps it's not something I would have done. It's about realizing the value of collaboration and other people's views. So one of the huge benefits for me, and I feel for the New Zealand university sector with women in leadership, is that it created collaborations that cross-pollinated across the different universities. You know, I've got some fabulous colleagues on other universities who have very similar challenges, or particularly around the delivery of absolutely leading edge, effective student life services. So I can pick up the phone to a colleague at Victoria or Canterbury or Lincoln, in fact any of them, and often we can have some really fabulous discussions that grows the knowledge and the ability for the entire university sector. So that's huge value added. Those collaborations and those relationships, in my view, are huge. And Women in Leadership effectively creates an environment where they will grow in a very positive way.
Kia ora koutou, nau mai haere mai kia koutou te whānau. Salam alaikum, talofa lava, aloha, kia orana, and good morning. As you all would have seen, in the spirit of COVID in 2020 that doesn't go as it's planned, we're on YouTube this morning. We've lost our feed to the virtual platform, so we will be on YouTube today. So if you're logged in, welcome, and we'll be on there for the whole day. There is a chat function, so the Q&A will work through the YouTube chat function today. Welcome back to day 2 of the New Zealand University's Women in Leadership Symposium. For those joining us for the first time today, welcome back, welcome, and we hope you enjoy the sessions with us today. Thank you to each of our alumni and your friends for taking the time to be here with us and for enjoying the sessions with us. Thank you to those that have taken the time last night to share your support and encouragement. The team really appreciates getting your feedback. I am Hanlie du Plessis, the Associate Director for HR at the University of Waikato, a member of the National Steering Group and an alumni of 2018. At the end of today, Professor Shelley Spiller will give us a recap and her highlights and observations of the symposium, so I won't spend any more time on that today. For those who joined yesterday, you would have gone in and out, into the developmental sessions and to the virtual networking. Please rest assured you don't have to worry about any technological difficulties today. You can just stay in there and just be logged on for the day. This morning, Professor Longhurst, Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic for the University of Waikato, will be opening our day and will be introducing our keynote speaker, Theresa Gattung. Before I hand over to Professor Robyn Longhurst, I would like to extend a special thank you to our sponsor and host, Te Whare Wānanga o Waikato, the University of Waikato, and also to our other sponsors, Crown Relocation, Fisher Leadership, and L'Oreal New Zealand. Without our sponsors, we would not have been able to run these 2 days. Over to you, Professor Longhurst.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Nau mai haere mai. Welcome everyone to day 2 of the New Zealand University's Women in Leadership Symposium. My name's Robyn Longhurst and I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic at Te Whare Wānanga o Waikato. We're really proud to host and sponsor this online event in 2020, and we really hope that our alumni and friends that you enjoyed day 1 yesterday and that you're looking forward to day 2 today. I would just in beginning like to take the opportunity to thank our other sponsors. We have Crown Relocations, Fisher Leadership, and very importantly L'Oreal. And I'd also like to thank our organising committee, Hanlie du Plessis, Michelle Jordan-Tong, Eva Collins, Tanya Heke, Helen McKinnon, Peter Goldsworthy, Lynn Bourne, Tricia Finn, Roy Mata-Batley, Cassandra Jatsam, Renee Boyer, and Louise Tainui. And finally, thank you to all of you for coming in, for Zooming in today for day 2. It's great to have you here with us. So just to begin, Hanlie asked me if I could provide you this morning with a few reflections on women taking leadership and responsibilities in their own lives. And then what I want to do is introduce you to our esteemed guest, Theresa Gattung, who probably may not need much introduction to many of you, but it will be my great pleasure to do that. But just before I do get on with some reflections, I would like to introduce myself to you so you know a little bit more about who's speaking to you this morning. I've spent most of my life in Kirikiriroa, Hamilton, which makes me sound rather parochial, I know. So maybe I ought to add that I have also spent a number of years living overseas. Some of that time in the UK and other times in the US in Colorado. And I've also had the immense privilege of being able to travel extensively internationally. But I come from a very working class family. My mother was responsible for the home, and when my sister and I were a bit older, she worked part-time as a hospital kitchen hand. My father was a civil servant during the day and a bartender at night. When it came to leaving school, and for those of you who do live in Hamilton, that was Fraser High School, and I chose this fine university, Waikato. In fact, it wasn't so much of a choice, really. It was more happenstance that someone from the university visited my high school to tell us about tertiary study, and seeing the visit as an opportunity to get out of one of the teaching periods I attended, and well, it seemed like a good idea to enrol. I'm not sure at that point I even realised there were another 7 universities in the country that I could have chosen. But I was first in my family to attend university. My parents weren't entirely sure it was a good idea, but I'd saved enough working in a holiday job to purchase a 120cc motorbike, which meant I could get myself there, so they agreed to that. Fast forward all the way to today, I'm a mum of 2 sons, well, one aged 29 and one aged 25. My eldest, Ben, works in the Beehive in Wellington as an advisor to a cabinet minister. And my young son, my baby, Jerome, he's a student at Media Design School in Auckland. And I'm incredibly proud of the work that they do. But I have to say, as a feminist mum, I'm even more proud that they have both grown into really lovely young men who are caring and respectful of others. In addition to being a mum, my second job is Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic here at the university. And it's of course in relation to that role that Hanlie invited me to speak to you this morning. So although I'm not an alumna of the NZUWiL program, I have engaged with it for many years on a couple of fronts. First, I've had the privilege of serving on, and then in more recent years, chairing the University of Waikato committee that assesses the applications to be awarded a place on the program, and that's both the academic program and the general staff program. Actually, over 50 of our staff have now completed the New Zealand University's Women in Leadership program, and many of these have gone on to contribute to the university, but also at regional, national and international levels, they've made contributions. One particular alumni of NZUWiL, of the discipline pod that was, some of you of course will know it was established more recently, is Dr. 𝗦𝗀𝘀𝘀𝗀𝗀, and I'm delighted that 𝗦𝗀𝗀𝘀𝗀𝗀 has just been awarded the L'Oreal for Women in Science Fellowship in climate change. So L'Oreal, as I mentioned before, are one of our sponsors, and you know, a huge shout out, 𝗦𝗀𝗀𝘀𝗀𝗀, huge congratulations to you. I think that's very well deserved and an amazing achievement. My second association with NZUWiL is that since 2014, I've been invited along with a representative from Otago University, initially with Professor Helen Nicholson, and then more recently with Professor Vicky Cameron, and we've run the Research Leadership Day, Day 4, Thursday. Some of the women are getting a little tired by the Thursday, but we've run this research day as part of that program, and it's been incredibly rewarding getting to meet women from universities all over the country who are really keen to step up and take on leadership responsibilities. So I've really enjoyed that. But now to the topic at hand, some of my own reflections on women taking leadership roles in their own lives and within their own spheres. I think probably like most women in New Zealand, and maybe even actually across the globe at this point, and what's been the most extraordinary, shall I say, the most challenging of years with COVID, I'm a bit tired to do much reflecting. When Hanlie asked me, I thought I wasn't sure I had any more reflections in me. I'm sure after a cup of tea or something a bit stronger, a bit of a lie down at Christmas and New Year, my usual high energy levels will return and I'll be brimming with insight. But for now, well, I did have 2 thoughts about things that I might just raise this morning that I've been mulling over for some time. The first is that I've been really intrigued by the media accounts of how nations with women leaders, including, of course, our own in Aotearoa with Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, have been more successful in managing COVID-19 than nations with men leaders. They, you know, some of the media accounts, commentators are saying that women leaders have reacted more quickly and decisively in the face of potential fatalities. Of course, though, it's not just prime ministers who've been leading throughout this time of the pandemic. Women have played a critical role, more generally all around the world, in responding to COVID-19. They are at the forefront of institutions carrying out effective and inclusive responses. And I'm talking here really from the highest levels of decision making right down to a lot of frontline service delivery work. Women lead households of families, of friends, of flatmates who've needed care and kindness. And at a more practical level, I suppose, you know, the buying of groceries, shopping and cooking and all of that important work that's been going on to keep families and households running. I think in this point is even more important right now because we know that health emergencies, they don't impact on men and women in the same way. And it's important to acknowledge this. For example, when women have been bearing the brunt of job losses much more so than men with COVID. And yet despite this, I think many women have really stepped up during this period in some pretty amazing ways. For academic women, there's now plenty of research that tells us that increased pressure caused by the pandemic's magnifying what we know is already a fairly fractured landscape in gender parity in academia. That impact is being felt in terms of research productivity. Let's face it, imagine it was pretty hard in lockdown if you were still trying to, if you were teaching everything online, attempting to do that, you were attempting to keep up with your research and you had a couple of preschoolers or even school-age kids all at home with you and you were trying to take care of them. But I think much more information, more data, more research will come to light on gender issues and women in leadership in relation to COVID as time goes on. So that was the first thing that's been going around in my head that I've been mulling over the last little while. The second thing that I've been reflecting on recently is actually my own role as DVCA or Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic this year. And I have to say it has felt incredibly challenging deciding with colleagues and with the Vice-Chancellor how to deliver teaching. How much online do we do? How much face-to-face do we do? How exactly do we blend those two at various times? And after having to go into lockdown in the first trimester, moving all of our teaching and learning fully online within the space of days, it was certainly apparent that many students and staff were keen once we got to B trimester for more face-to-face, but it was also apparent that others were not so keen. And that was for a variety of reasons like health, work commitments, family commitments, some combination of all of those things. So some students, they were stuck overseas, they had no choice. They definitely couldn't turn up to face-to-face classes. In the end, offering papers in what's sometimes called dual mode, that is enabling students to learn online and or face-to-face, seemed like a really good workable solution, but that was a big ask for staff to deliver in that way. And it quickly became apparent actually that no decision on teaching delivery for B trimester was ever going to satisfy everyone, staff, students, and as it turned out, the parents of students. Alongside all of this, unfortunately, the media seemed to understand that the University of Waikato's blended approach, what that meant in the minds of some was a fully online approach, and they ran headlines on TV1 News stuff, Radio New Zealand, such as frustrations over face-to-face lecture ban and Waikato University defends abandoning face-to-face lectures. The reports were misleading. We weren't banning face-to-face lectures. We did take an opportunity to not offer really large classes in which there was no or little interaction between teachers and their students. But as a result of the media reports, the VC, Professor 𝗦𝗀𝘀𝘀𝗀𝗀 and I received a number of emails from angry and upset parents thinking that their child or their children, if they had a couple of children at university, had no opportunity to face-to-face learning in B trimester. And they were going to be destined to spend this whole of the teaching period shut in their bedrooms on their devices, a bit like what had happened to them, of course, during lockdown. A number of parents wrote saying that they didn't want their child to know that they had written to us, but they really couldn't understand why we weren't just going back to normal. One parent commented that our approach showed a disturbing disregard for students' well-being, and others were much more direct, some actually downright rude. But it was very clear that during this period, emotions were running high for students, running high for staff, running high for the parents of students. And what I wanted just to say to you this morning is that this period really tested my leadership skills. I felt at times unprepared to make some tough calls. I felt that the timeframes for decision making were just impossibly tight. I felt really upset for those parents who were upset because I knew they were concerned about their children's welfare, and I know what this feels like. I felt upset about the students who were upset and clearly struggling. So, you know, in short, I felt self-doubt. I felt that maybe the parents and the students were right. Maybe the decision we'd taken was wrong. Maybe COVID was for the most part over and we were on the home straight and we could all just go back to life as normal at university. But actually, as it turns out, with alert levels shifting again, the decision that we took turned out to be a good one. And towards the end of trimester B, 841 students answered a survey for us that we sent out on their experiences of B trimester. Actually, close on 80% of these students answered that they were either neutral, agreed, or strongly agreed with the statement that the blend of online and face-to-face teaching had been about right during the semester to enable their learning, which I have to say was incredibly heartening after all of that had transpired during the trimester. Why am I telling you all this? Well, I'm offering up the reflection because I know that others, all of you here this morning, will have faced and continue to face challenges of leading in your own lives at this time. And exposing this vulnerability, our self-doubts, I see as a positive thing. Some of you will likely be familiar with the work of Brené Brown, her books and her TED Talks, for example, on things like the power of vulnerability. So Brown's an American professor, a lecturer, author, and she does a lot of podcasts. She says that when she talks about vulnerability and exposing one's own vulnerability, she's not meaning oversharing. She says they're different. Talking about vulnerability, it's not necessarily about self-disclosure, but instead it's about sharing in ways that benefit one's company or one's institution. She says that when you're in times of uncertainty, when you feel at risk, when you feel exposed, don't tap out. Stay brave, be uncomfortable, stay in the cringy moment, lean into the conversation and keep learning. What's really interesting to me in all this is that a lot of the characteristics that were historically associated with femininity in women, things like vulnerability, empathy, acknowledging human fragility, being kind, it turns out go a long way in a global pandemic. And I'm just going to leave it there this morning. You've probably heard quite enough from me on Zoom. It is a different thing from in person. I fully acknowledge that, but I really want to thank you for listening, and I want to wish you the best for the rest of your day. But before I sign out, I really want to just introduce our guest this morning, Theresa Gattung. And Theresa is a companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit. She's our keynote speaker, but you will have an opportunity there as well for questions and answers in the session with Theresa. Theresa is really one of New Zealand's most well-known and successful business people. We're very proud at the University of Waikato to call her one of our own. So after graduating in 1984 with a BMS Hons, majoring in economics and marketing, Theresa headed for Wellington to study law. And I won't tell you too much because I think her career story will actually already be familiar to many of you. Theresa was the first woman to run a large New Zealand public company, Telecom. She was the inaugural chair of a large primary exporter, Wool Partners International, co-founder of a successful meal delivery service, My Food Bag, and the list goes on. Her successes are many. So Theresa was an obvious choice. In 2007, she received one of the first University of Waikato Distinguished Alumni Awards. And we're really delighted to have Theresa as our guest speaker this morning. She's got experience as a CEO, as chair of boards, an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, an investor. And Theresa has always given back, and I actually think this makes her really special. So welcome, Theresa. We're delighted to have you with us this morning. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Robyn. And morena e wahine mā. It's great to be able to have this korero with you today. Just making sure, Hanlie, that it's all good, everyone can hear me, it's all fine? Yeah, okay. So as Robyn said, I was very keen that this be as interactive as possible. And so I'm going to make a few observations about women in leadership for about 15 to 20 minutes. And then Hanlie is going to have a moderator Q&A. And I'm happy for anyone to ask me any questions about anything, really, anything I've touched on or anything I haven't touched on. So yes, I am very proud to be a graduate of the University of Waikato and to be one of the early distinguished alumni. And I've always been a feminist. So Robyn's right, I did do a management degree. I got honours in economics and marketing, but I also did women's studies in the School of Arts at that time. Now, 35 years ago, it was really unusual. There were only a handful of women doing business. There was no one else from management studies doing women's studies. It was it's still probably reasonably unusual today to combine a business degree with women's studies. It was pretty much unheard of 35 years ago. And that for me was really an example of being true to my own self, which is that I come from entrepreneurial parents, immigrants. I've always been interested in business. I think the intersection of people and money is fascinating. But I've also always understood that there are systemic barriers to women achieving and fulfilling their own potential and standing, in the words of Kate Shepherd, in their full power in their personal sphere and the public sphere. And I've always worked either covertly or overtly, and more recently overtly, to try and do something about that. So I want to start by picking up actually where Robyn started, which is what we're seeing at the moment, which is indeed the rise of female leadership in the world. And we're seeing it, we've seen it through COVID. It's certainly the case that there are some countries led by men that have dealt with COVID well, but it's almost 100% the case that no country led by a woman has dealt with COVID poorly. So pretty much all countries led by women have done pretty well, and only some countries led by men. So that is also seen across the Tasman as well in Australia. New South Wales, Queensland, very effective at controlling the spread of COVID, both with female premiers. Victoria, very, very much a more difficult situation with many mistakes made, male premier. Other states, male premiers did quite well. So again, the two women premiers did very well. Now, we're also starting to see it now in the world stage. Kamala Harris is first female vice president of the United States. And of course, first Black female in that sort of role. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute, the intersectionality that we're seeing in the rise of female leadership in the world. But why are we seeing this rise in female leadership in the world now? Is it just a coincidence? Is it finally the coming of age of women in their 40s and 50s who grew up with the girls can do anything mantra? Look, that's part of it. What happens in life, I believe, is always a co-creation between what's going on internally and what's happening externally. But I fundamentally believe that we're seeing the rise of female leadership because the world needs it. We all have been relying too much on the masculine way of being in the world. And for people who were early, women who were early into positions of power, like I was, there was almost no way to get to the top as a woman, whether it was the political route or the business route, unless you really were acceptable to the boys, and you couldn't exactly be one of them, but you had to master the skills in a pretty similar way to they did it, at least to get to the top, if not to actually stay there as well. But that isn't really what the world needs. The world needs to be completely balanced in feminine and masculine energies. And one of the things that COVID has done is it's actually seen the reemergence of the importance of rest and the quiet cultivation of mind, body, spirit, and the land. It's really important for women who aspire to leadership. I'll come back to that in terms of what that can look like, because leadership can also look like followership. Sometimes leadership doesn't actually mean the one person at the top of any pyramid. That's a very male model. Leadership can look like folks on the ground actually making stuff happen. But for those women who do aspire to, let me call it institutional leadership, it actually starts, I believe, if we are to fulfill the potential that the world needs us to fulfill, it starts with balance in our own self. It starts with balance in our own bodies, ease in our own bodies, being comfortable being a woman. Nothing is certain advanced if we lead predominantly in our male energy. What is really different about the female leadership we see around us now, extraordinary number of female MPs we now have in Parliament, the number of female MPs we have in Cabinet, and the last time we saw this, which was in 1999, when Helen Clark was Prime Minister, Jenny Shipley was Leader of the Opposition, Sylvia Cartwright was Governor-General, I was running the largest company in New Zealand, and the list went on. The difference this time round is the intersectionality. It's the rise of iwi. It's the understanding globally that female leadership needs to be paired with the wisdom of Indigenous people. And I mentioned before that leadership isn't always just about the person at the top. Quite a few of my female friends in America, my American girlfriends, believe that Biden's victory is actually down to the grassroots power of Black women organising on the ground in states like Georgia. Getting other people out, getting Black women out to first of all register and then to vote. And some of the things that are becoming a new language, like gender creative, gender diverse, gender fluidity, those sort of concepts, that welcoming of all, that gender is actually non-binary, those sort of ideas, which I'm calling intersectionality, that intersectionality of identity, of race, of gender, and also to be proud of our identity. Māori woman wearing full mokokore in Cabinet. It's fantastic. I really didn't think I'd see that in the next 10 years of my lifetime. And sometimes I believe, very similar actually to the way that Jacinda became Prime Minister in the beginning, sometimes I believe events can happen, a bit like sliding doors, as a portal opens up and there's an opportunity for a person or a group of people to go through that can then transform that company, that institution, that country, the world. And New Zealand is such a beacon in the world. Some of you will have seen Paddy Gower's interview when he was over in the US for the election, put a microphone under Nancy Pelosi's nose and said, look, I'm from New Zealand. Have you got anything to say? And she basically said, look, you guys lead the world. You are the hope for the world. And I really do think that we are. I think about the fact that when votes for women became law in New Zealand, it wasn't just the colonial white woman who got the vote. It was all women. It was Māori women as well. And in fact, those wahine were well ahead of Pākehā women in understanding that it wasn't just about being able to vote. It was about being able to be in power, to be an MP. And they had suffered firsthand from sexism because they had lost rights to their own property if they married white men. So owning property in their own name, all the issues that Kate Shepherd and the National Council of Women were focused on, those wasn't just about the right to vote. And many of those things like equal pay for work of equal value, we're still struggling with today. So female leadership can take many forms, but the form that it doesn't take is it explodes the myth of control. If there's anything that this year should have shown us, it's that we have less control over the external environment than we would like to think. And it's the masculine view that we must control the environment, our families, the outcomes, even animals, that leads to so much suffering. And to learn to actually take action in right relationship, but be guided by what feels right, requires all of us to stay and balance ourselves and to honour the feminine side of our natures, whether we are men or women. A quiet trend that many of you will be aware of, but it's really been creeping up in the last years, is indeed the rise of Māori female leadership in New Zealand. All the largest iwi now have wahine as CEOs. When I went through law school at Victoria University, I went through with a lot of Māori men and women who wanted to use their degrees to change the world, to change the country, first of all, for the better for their people. They've all become judges or senior lawyers, and they have indeed done that, perhaps beyond their wildest dreams. And as many of you will know, the Cabinet was sworn in this week, and of the 120 MPs, 77 gave the oath in English and 44 in Te Reo. So we stand collectively at the edge of leading the world with the rise of female and Indigenous leadership. And we must seize this moment, not just for ourselves, but for what we can create in Aotearoa and what that can showcase for the world. Representation remains important. Representation in this parliamentary term has not quite, it's not yet equal 50-50, but it's had a huge boost forward. Representation in the business community is still lagging. I'm a member of Global Women, and Global Women is about equal representation of women and men in what we think about as the powerful roles on the executive, a CEO, and on boards. And in New Zealand, we're stuck. We're sort of stuck, and we actually lag behind Australia in terms of percentage of women on boards. Germany, just this last week, has actually passed quotas, not for women on boards, but for the numbers of women in senior leadership roles, because the power in an organisation is around the CEO and their executive team. There are some situations where the power resides with the board. Certainly the legal governance responsibility resides with the board, but information flows, the real power usually sits with the CEO. In that regard, New Zealand is still very, very poorly represented, with only a couple of female CEOs. It's interesting that those companies that truly do serve the whole population, such as banks, 3 of our 4 leading banks are run by women. They're not listed companies in New Zealand, however. They're listed companies, well, their head offices, generally speaking, are in Australia. So if you count them, the stats look a little better, but if you don't count the CEOs of the banks that are owned in Australia, our stats for female leaders in our top companies in New Zealand still look very poor. So that's something that I'm thinking about at the moment. How can I play an even greater role than this? In the past few years, I have really been much more involved in the entrepreneurial space with my food bag, an idea which came from a woman, Celia Robinson, launched by 3 women to support families. But let's face it, it's still mainly the woman taking on domestic responsibilities and worrying about, what's for dinner tonight. And we continue to get stories of how life-changing that service has been. So I've mainly been involved in the entrepreneurial space and seen how important it is for women to support other women. And that's why I'm really excited to be part of the pathway of women getting funding for their businesses in New Zealand, because women tend to start businesses when they see a problem. And Hanlie asked me to do this korero with you today because she became part of SheEO. And the SheEO community is something I'd like to recommend to all of you. SheEO is the brainchild of a Canadian entrepreneur called Vicky Saunders, who effectively, when she listed her company, was told by PE, well, now that we're listing it, we'll need a real adult to run it, i.e. a man. So she let them basically install a male CEO. And afterwards she thought, why did I do that? Why did I believe that, that was a real thing? So inside all successful women still occasionally sits the imposter syndrome, the feeling that, okay, someone's going to wake up one day and figure out I don't really know what I'm doing. Little do they know that sometimes all men and women are making it up as they go along. That's what an entrepreneur does. Anyway, Vicky had the idea that she wanted to support women globally, to never see that sort of thing happening again, to demystify funding for ventures, to support ventures that were working on the world's to-do list of problems. So I heard Vicky speak, and together we brought SheO to New Zealand several years ago. We've now had 3 successful rounds, so 3 years. We're now supporting 15 ventures, and some of those ventures have gone on to get capital from women in the community. But you don't have to have a lot of money to be part of it. The idea is that several hundred women each put in $1,100, and the pot of around $500,000 is lent out to the businesses, the women who are the activators, who have activated their money and their networks in support, select. So there's no expert panel. The women select the 5 ventures and they receive the money as an interest-free loan over 5 years, which is then paid back and then added to next year's tally and loaned out again for next year's ventures. So right now there's just under $1 million, which is circulating, being loaned out, paid back, circulating in perpetuity, and every year more money gets added to that pot. But it's not just the funding. Any of those SheO ventures would tell you, particularly the ones that have tried to do things in a male-dominated world. Petra Hackinson, the founder of Guardian Security and the security business, very male-dominated industry, very transactional, very tough. She has been in tears talking about how with SheO she found her tribe. She found a lawyer who, pro bono, helped her get out of a very difficult JV that she'd got into that just ended up to be terrible. She would have ended up shutting her business if she couldn't find a way out of that. She found people to help her with branding. She found leads, and all the ventures will give you those stories. So I've been delighted to be part of that, and I commend it to you all. Just like this call is on Zoom, I also have had a learning about the possibility of technology and how we might use that to do good in the world. At the start of lockdown, we just started our round this year. We'd had our launch, which had been fantastic because the Governor General is a 3-time activator, so we'd had a wonderful evening at Government House in Auckland. And then lockdown came in March, and I thought we were going to have to stop. But instead, we started weekly calls with all the activators around New Zealand. It immediately made it less Auckland-centric because all the main events had been in Auckland up to that point. And I just let the energy grow organically, and the community said, let's keep going. So it was a real lesson for me because I'm very energetic, and as a leader, I'm very action-oriented. So I tend to want to make things happen, drive things along. And this year has been such a lesson for me for where I started this little korero, which is sometimes the power is not in just one person's intention. The power is in the collective energy, the collective intention of what a group, in this case, a group of women, can achieve. And so those of you on this call are probably employed by a university, but you will be aware that entrepreneurialism has been the movement of my professional career. It didn't exist when I went and worked for TVNZ and then National Mutual, then Bank of New Zealand and Telecom. I may still have chosen that path, but I might not. I might have chosen a more entrepreneurial path earlier. And big corporates, although they're really quite liberal in New Zealand, are on the most part not as cool as actually creating something and bringing it to life and growing it to scale. That is what young people today tend to aspire to. So for those of you who are academics, I think you're teaching in a time of the world that there's a profound shift. I think there is a portal, there's a profound opportunity for all of us, men and women who are alive to it, to respond to what we see and feel, adjust, adapt, live an even richer, more creative life, and change the world for the better. Because I truly believe that we're not going to go back to the way things were. AIA, which is a large company that I chair, in the Auckland office, we would have less than 25% of the staff in the office. There has been no impact in terms of negatively on productivity and good impact on staff wellbeing. And now many teams meet for 1 or 2 days a week in the office and then work from home the rest of the time. So these trends are permanent. And this is a time for us to regather and go, well, what indeed is worth hanging on to of what we've learned from COVID? What is worth going back to? And how can we individually and collectively take this moment where female leadership is in the spotlight and advance humanity? Okay, Hanlie, I think I'll stop there because I've probably gone over time.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Theresa, for joining us today. I'm personally extremely thrilled. I do have the privilege of seeing you in those activator calls on Wednesday mornings, and that has become my tribe too, and I really enjoy being part of that community. Theresa, you speak about the world needing a change in female leadership and the countries that are successful because of that female leadership. Yesterday we had a conversation and a session on compassionate leadership. And the one nugget that's come out of that, and the question that I feel wasn't particularly addressed, and I thought I'd address it with you, is compassionate leadership. Do you think that's a gender-based leadership skill?
Gosh, that's a good question. I don't usually start an answer with so it shows I'm thinking. What I believe is that, well, when I became CEO, my then partner said I should watch John Wayne movies. And I said, why? He said, because that's the American model of leadership. And indeed, I think he was right. One white man, rides into town with his horse, has one sidekick, law sidekick, Tonto, sorts out whatever the problems are in the township, rides off, and the happy townspeople clap him. I know it seems ridiculous, but that model of leadership, I think, still does power America, or has powered America is a better way to put it. Because in US corporates, they don't have the separation of powers that is the British model we see in New Zealand and Australia of the chair and CEO be separate. Many US companies still have the same person as chair and CEO. And when I went to a CEO summit with Warren Buffett and Bill Gates many years ago, and I asked them about that model, basically saying I think a split model is better, such as the British system, they looked at me as if I had two heads, and they said, but how can you have more than the one jockey on the one horse? The John Wayne model. So I think the model of leadership that we see around us, business, politics, has been one white old man with the power. And that is the antithesis, and that's the antithesis, the man with the biggest stick. It's just the antithesis of compassionate leadership. So men have compassion, of course, but it has been very hard to avoid being seen as weak or sissy, even if you're a woman showing compassion, let alone if you're a man. So, I think Obama in some ways was quite a compassionate leader. He tried to balance those different aspects of himself as a person. I think it's harder for men to demonstrate compassion, leadership, and to get that balance. I think it's slightly easier for women, but only if they've already earned the respect that they don't look weak. So I think this is absolutely still a work in progress. The word compassion is seen as a caring word, it's a soft word. We've now got the word kind in the New Zealand leadership vocabulary. Collaborative is definitely a thing in companies, collaborative rather than huge ego. So the trend of more female attributes being seen as desirable qualities in leaders is definitely a thing. But compassion is actually still sort of
Awesome.
sitting out there, not completely integrated at the moment, I think.
Theresa, over the last little bit, I've read your book, and I know that it's been published a while ago, but one of the themes in that book that really struck with me is you keep talking about turning a crisis into an opportunity, being able to shift your mind from this is a dilemma and I'm dead in the water to actually this is a really good opportunity and I'm going to take it and make something great of it. I wonder if you could share your secret in shifting your mind in that space from complete crisis to actually this is a good thing.
Gosh, that's a really good question. So I think I am a resilient person, and that's because I came from a very, very loving background. And some people are like me, who are fortunate to be born with that quality and from in that background. And some people really have to work at it because they didn't have that. I have, in my professional life and in my personal life, I have had the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. I completely know what it's like to be right on the top end of the wave, and I completely know what it's like to be dumped in every sense, professionally and personally. And I think it is really important to your sense of self and grounding to be able to rise again, to know at any time who truly loves you, who truly will be there, whether you're on the rise or you're no longer flavour of the month, whether you've got ill health. And really, I took a year out in 2018. I just really had serious health issues and I just needed a complete rest. And who showed up for me then? The people that showed up for me then. And some of my friends then said, oh, we so much prefer this to when you were so busy and it was hard to, get to see you. So I think the first thing is surround yourself with people who love you, who really care and will support you. And then in all the things that you do, surround yourself with people who care about those causes, who care about the success of the university, who care about the success of the business. And don't spend too long working on your weaknesses. This is my advice to everyone. I don't even know if it's kosher. I don't know what HR professionals think. I don't know what they tell people in organisations. I believe that you should understand your strengths, work on your strengths, know what your weaknesses are, and surround yourself with people who have those as strengths, so that together you can conquer mountains. And because all skills are transferable, nobody should ever think their job is their identity. It's been another learning from COVID. So sometimes it's taken me a while to regroup. Sometimes I've regrouped quite quickly. Sometimes I've done things with the best of intent and it hasn't worked out. And you sort of also have to know, I like playing cards, and you sort of have to know when to fold, when to go, no, I'm not raising my bet. So resilience is important, but not to the point where it obscures good judgment. And you need people who love you with good judgment that you will listen to. So I'm very close to my sisters. I have many close friends. I feel surrounded by wairua, spirit, energy, and aroha, love, and everything that I do. And I've created that now in the communities, or I'm trying to create that in the communities that I'm part of. So I'm not sure what the magic answer is. Some people are more reflective than others. I've seen friends go through difficult times who need to go away and process it, spend a lot of time by themselves or walking their dog. Often introverts have to deal with it that way or write it in a journal. I've seen extroverts process it by getting going, by distracting their, negative thoughts in their mind, by starting something new, by surrounding themselves with people of good energy and doing something new and positive. And that can work as well. So I don't think there's any one way. And I've done both. At times I've completely stopped, and other times I've barely missed a beat. I've just got on with the next thing.
I'll go over to some of our audience's questions now, if that's okay. And we have a question here that says that you mentioned that you are an energetic person. How do you choose what to give your energy to? And how do you pick your worthy causes?
That's another excellent question. And can I just say that I'm still learning this. If I had the answer to that, I wouldn't have got exhausted in 2018. Well, the first thing I think is that whether it's paid work or voluntary, you should only do what you love, because that will give you energy. And if you don't love it, it'll be draining. And so my particular causes are women and girls and animals. I spent 10 years working with the SPCA and was part of a group that, first of all, set up Wellington SPCA, which was about to, it was in dire straits financially, and then worked with the chairs of the other SPCAs in New Zealand to set the organisation up on a better path. And that's been obviously shown its worth in COVID. So animals, I have a very soft spot for, and I'm currently a supporter of Pet Refuge, because that brings together my passions about supporting women, domestic violence and pets. Pet Refuge is the brainchild of Julie Chapman, who is the founder of Kids Can, and she has built a place where pets can go, because Women's Refuge and SPCA twice did work that showed there was a deep link between people who bash pets and people who bash their partners. And many women do not leave for women's shelters because they can't take their dogs with them and they're afraid their partner will kill their dogs. So that's a good example for me of an intersection of something I couldn't say no to, because it brought together two passions. I support Tree Sisters globally. It brings together passion for the environment and funding women in all over the world to plant trees. So do what you love and don't do what isn't going to bring you joy. Make every choice a happy choice. It can also help if you have a filter. I have a wonderful assistant, Chris Woodward, who's worked with me for most of the last 30 years. She lives in Nelson now, and she filters. So I ask her to go back and do a polite decline so that I don't have to, engage in that. And some people who are self-employed use their partners to do that, or their manager, because that's can be quite hard. So sometimes a filter of the person actually saying, look, this isn't going to work, and this is why, can be quite useful. But basically, I think I think that when you're in your 50s and 60s, the limitation may not be time. It's probably more likely, it can be time. For me, it's not time, it's energy. It's energy. I actually have a diary that I completely fill myself. No one tells me, I'm not working for any boss. So no one says you must be here at this time. I agree to everything. But still, I can overfill my days. And so guarding your energy, getting into good sleep patterns and good exercise patterns and good, rest or restorative patterns of whatever other practices you're doing, making those the priority, putting yourself first.
Theresa, another question that we have is, yesterday we had the conversation about leadership and many women not associating themselves with that word. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
That's interesting. I've always aspired to be a leader, and I've always associated myself with that word, and I've always seen myself as a leader. But good leadership is essential, but so is good followership. There's no leader without a follower. And my assistant, who I mentioned, Chris, hates being in the limelight. She loves working with me on these things, and she really does work with me. We work together on everything that we do. But she doesn't want to lead in, out in the front, so to speak. So leadership comes in very many forms. Leadership can be good followership, because that leadership is about what you do, not what you say. And all of us have power about what we do. And that power has a role modelling effect, whatever label we might be wearing in our work world.
Back to politics, Theresa, and our audience says, as you said, we are making strides in women representation in politics. Why do you think there is still a lag in the business world?
A lot of women don't feel comfortable around big amounts of money. I think women are more likely to be brought up thinking about money as a scarce thing. It's hard to get money, it's hard to have money. And I was fortunate to be brought up by a father who had 5 sisters and 4 daughters. and believed anything was possible, and that everybody could have money. It was no win-lose. There's no pot. I see money as currency, current energy, currency, money in circulation. From when I first was working full-time, for my first paycheck, and I think in those days it was a paycheck, I started direct debits to charities, Amnesty International, Women's Refuge, SPCA, that I've continued to this day, obviously at larger amounts. So I believe that money needs to be in circulation, and if you give away, it will come back to you. And if you spend with joy, it will come back to you. And so I see it as a resource. I see it as a resource. I'm powering many charitable initiatives and doing many things that, I mean, lack of money, being financially dependent upon anyone is a terrible situation to be in. Can't stand on your own 2 feet if you can't support yourself financially. So that I think is one thing. It's definitely true that while there's more women coming out of business school, it hasn't quite reached the proportions that, say, law, which has been more than half female graduates, some law schools for quite a while now. And it still is harder because of what I said before about leaders being seen as tall white men. It's hard. It's still harder for women, and the penalties for failure are higher than men. Now, here we are different from the US. In the US, if you fail, you pick yourself up and you go again. But in New Zealand, we're really, really hard on people who failed, whether that's an All Blacks coach or perceived failure. And if a woman is perceived to have failed, it's very difficult to come back from that. So I think I don't want to say there's not enough financial literacy, because that's not quite the essence of it. I think it's what I've mentioned before, of course. Big corporates aren't cool. So being a CEO of a big corporate is not necessarily a cool thing to aspire to, but plenty of boys aspire to it anyway. More women tend to go, look, I can do my own thing. And so what I see with women entrepreneurs is they don't have big enough ambitions for their business often. A man would be thinking about how to capital raise, how to scale it, and a woman would be going, okay, well, this fits my flexible life. There's nothing wrong with that. But if women want to control capital, then some of us have to actually love that area and want to do that, while at the same time working to change the paradigms that have actually kept so many women stuck. And then, of course, there's the fact I mentioned before, women do get paid less at every level. There's still not pay equity.
Theresa, we've got time for one more question and then we'll wrap it up. We'd love to know what's next for you. What's your next challenge that you'll be taking on?
Well, there's something that's coming up next year that isn't yet public, but all of you on the call, when you see it, you'll understand how it links to the remarks I've made this morning. But the most recent new challenge for me is Tend. This is a startup, also the brainchild of Celia and James Robinson, which I'm chairing and a major investor in. And we've just launched, and this is healthcare online. So primary healthcare over video conference. So we hire doctors. Some GPs do enable you to connect with them by remote, but we're not talking about accessing services that already exist. We're talking about enrolling online, being able to do everything online. We will have clinics as well. We have a big, lovely clinic in Kingsland and Auckland, central Auckland. We're only in Auckland at the moment, but we will roll out nationally. And, late last year, the research showed that only 10% of people thought this was a thing. But after COVID, 76% of people thought this was a thing. We've been working on this for 2 years, so our timing has nothing to do with COVID. But many people do not have a GP. Many people, like my mum, have to wait a week or more to get in to see their GP. Most GPs only work, normal working days. I've had major problems happen Friday nights or Saturday mornings. When you need to see a doctor, you need to be able to call a doctor, see a doctor, get really good medical support straight away. And so we want to do this, and we think this choice, it's a choice people have. You can stay with a GP and just use Tend incidentally, or you can enroll and you can have the same doctor each time. We can have next available appointment. So we think this will add a fantastic, another choice to healthcare in New Zealand that will benefit all of us, particularly people who don't live close to medical support.
Theresa, thank you so much for your time this morning. I feel like I could go another hour, but I'm getting the waves from the back of the room, so I better shut it down. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you for saying yes to being here, and I look forward to seeing you on the next Activator call. All the best with TEND, and ka kite anō.
Ka kite anō, everyone. Ka kite.
To our audience, we'll now break for a nice refreshment. Stretch your legs. We'll see you back in YouTube at 10:50 for our next session. See you soon.
The world is a big, wonderful place, full of opportunities. No two countries are the same, and no two mobility programs are either. We know the complexities that come with moving employees and their families across borders, both for your business and your relocating employees. We can advise you on how to best develop or modify your mobility program. Whatever the size and needs of your business, we deliver a customized approach. And to simplify everything, we operate through a single point of coordination. From tailored advice to practical support, our robust knowledge of international immigration policy means you can relax. We'll assist in pre-planning, paperwork, visas, and everything else along the way. Our focus is on your compliance. Financial transparency and control are critical to every mobility program success. We can help you with both program budgeting and management of associated costs. We have a full suite of flexible mobility services to enhance all aspects of your program. Together, we can build the best international relocation experience for your employees, their families, and your business. Global in scope, human in scale. The world is a big, wonderful place, full of opportunities. No two countries are the same, and no two mobility programs are either. We know the complexities that come with moving employees and their families across borders, both for your business and your relocating employees. We can advise you on how to best develop or modify your mobility program. Whatever the size and needs of your business, we deliver a customized approach. And to simplify everything, we operate through a single point of coordination. From tailored advice to practical support, our robust knowledge of international immigration policy means you can relax. We'll assist in pre-planning, paperwork, visas, and everything else along the way. Our focus is on your compliance. Financial transparency and control are critical to every mobility program success. We can help you with both program budgeting and management of associated costs. We have a full suite of flexible mobility services to enhance all aspects of your program. Together, we can build the best international relocation experience for your employees, their families, and your business. Global in scope, human in scale. The world is a big, wonderful place, full of opportunities. No two countries are the same, and no two mobility programs are either. We know the complexities that come with moving employees and their families across borders, both for your business and your relocating employees. We can advise you on how to best develop or modify your mobility program. Whatever the size and needs of your business, we deliver a customized approach. And to simplify everything, we operate through a single point of coordination. From tailored advice to practical support, our robust knowledge of international immigration policy means you can relax. We'll assist in pre-planning, paperwork, visas, and everything else along the way. Our focus is on your compliance. Financial transparency and control are critical to every mobility program success. We can help you with both program budgeting and management of associated costs. We have a full suite of flexible mobility services to enhance all aspects of your program. Together, we can build the best international relocation experience for your employees, their families, and your business. Global in scope, human in scale.
Welcome back. I hope you're all refreshed and ready for the next session. Before we welcome the Barbour sisters and Professor Bryony James, I want to acknowledge a University of Waikato senior lecturer and alumni of the NZUWiL Discipline Pod, Dr. Shari Gallop. Dr. Gallop was awarded the L'Oreal for Women in Science Fellowship in Climate Change. We are extremely proud of you, Shari, as a colleague and as a fellow alumni. Here is Shari's journey.
Tēnā koutou. It's my very great pleasure to join the New Zealand University's Women in Leadership Symposium today. My name is Tanya Abbott and I'm delighted to be part of the symposium. You might be wondering what is the connection between a beauty company and you all today. Well, actually for us it's a very natural connection to championing the cause of women and equity and really engaging in that conversation around diversity and empowerment. So like every good partnership, this partnership for L'Oreal with New Zealand Women in Leadership started over a very beautiful glass of French wine in Paris with two Kiwi women. I was lucky enough to be one of them, and the other one was the founder of, one of the co-founders of Women in Leadership program, Dr. 𝗦𝗀𝘀𝘀𝗶cie, and this was back in 2007, and Di was talking about this real calling that she felt to really champion women in academia and creating greater diversity in those senior leadership roles. So out of that great conversation came a really rich and rewarding partnership for L'Oreal to support this program and its growth over the last few years. So, you know, for us, the other great connection is the work that we do with the L'Oreal UNESCO for Women in Science program. So I thought, rather than me talking today, I would invite our latest Women in Science New Zealand Fellow, Dr. Shari Gallop. Dr. Shari Gallop is a marine environmental scientist, and she has just received the L'Oreal Fellowship Award for her work around the restoration of estuaries, and in particular the impacts to climate change. So these fellowships are annual. The L'Oreal Group has been championing these fellowships for the last 20 odd years in 117 countries. And so we're delighted each year in New Zealand to reward a New Zealand researcher with $25,000 fellowship to further their research. And I guess one of the unique parts is that it can be used for childcare. So Dr. Shari Gallop is at the University of Waikato, so many of you will relate today, and has two small children herself. So I know that she talks about the challenges of a working mother in the field of research with two small children. So I'm now going to hand over to Shari to talk to you a little bit about her journey and what a woman in leadership and when women succeed, what that means for her. Kia ora.
Estuaries are where the land meets the sea. In many places around the world, our estuaries have been degraded. My work focuses on the restoration of estuaries. Estuaries are an important resource for removing carbon dioxide from our atmosphere. My research aims to find out how do we make sure that these estuaries can be healthy long into the future. We're going to be using a combination of really detailed field measurements, and we're going to combine that with state-of-the-art computer modelling to make predictions about what will happen with climate change. We need to make sure we look after our estuaries so that we can feed our planet and also have a good quality of life. Some of our largest cities are built around estuaries: San Francisco, Tokyo, and Sydney. There are also many Indigenous peoples who are reliant on estuaries for their resources. I see it as a way that I can make a contribution to communities all around the world with my research.
Kia ora, I'm grateful to be part of the New Zealand University's Women in Leadership Symposium today. I'm a senior lecturer based at the University of Waikato Tauranga campus. I love being a scientist, I'm really passionate about it, but it definitely has its challenges. We know that in general in science there's a gender diversity problem. Some disciplines are doing better than others. Steps have been made, but there's still a bit of a way to go. In my field of coastal science, it's still male-dominated. And looking back on my career, I can think now that having role models and mentors has been really important for me, right from in my high school days when I started doing science, through to my master's degree when I first delved into research during a master's project where my supervisor was a woman, she had a couple of kids, and I just assumed that was normal in my field to be doing that, so I never questioned it. And then since then, I also have had many great role models and mentors, both men and women, and they've just been really encouraging me, and I wouldn't be where I am today without them. So I really think that's an important part of the way forward. One of my major challenges was when I became a mother. My kids are 3 and 6, and they were both born in overseas, so in the UK and Australia, away from my family. And that was a really challenging time, still is now, even though I'm back home and have their support. But I found that they've sort of caused me to reassess my priorities in science. Why am I doing this project and where do I want to go? So that was one of the reasons why I started working on estuaries and climate change, because I just recognise there's such an important environment, so many people are reliant on them, and they're at real risk of climate change impact. So I want to learn more about their restoration under climate change. So my kids have inspired me to make sure I do something that matters. To me, imposter syndrome is that little voice in your head that tells you that you're not good enough and says that you're going to be discovered or found out for being wanting. But I've tried to get better at recognising that voice for what it is and just letting it pass. I've also found that talking to other people, so both men and women, about it has really helped. So just learning that other people also suffer from this at some stage in their careers, and for me, it's really helped it lose its power over me. I never started out my career with some plan to be a leader, but along the way, there have been opportunities have arisen that I felt like I've had to step out and put my hand up and raise my voice. So to me, success in leadership means that sometimes you are the one who has to step out because you are the person in that place in that time and you can have a voice. So I've had to do this in terms of speaking out about gender bias and also speaking out and communicating about climate change and the importance of environmental restoration. So to me, and my version of success is that I've had to put myself out there in ways I never expected, but I think good things have come from it.
So Shari, I'd just like to thank you for your words today, and we are so excited to have you as this year's Women in Science Fellow. We're just super excited to follow your progress and your research. And a very big thank you to the New Zealand University's Women in Leadership program team. Thank you for inviting us to share a part of your symposium this year, and we wish you all the best for the next few days together.
Cheers.
Congratulations, Dr. Shari Gallup. We are exceptionally proud of you and we wish you all the very best for the next steps in your career. Now, for the long-awaited Sister Act. I know many of you have been very excited to see the Sister Act today. I won't say anything more. I will simply hand over to the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Research at the University of Waikato, Dr. Bryony James.
Enga mana, enga reo, enga rau rangatira, o ngā hau e whā, tēnā koutou katoa. Nē rā te mihi motahaki ki te kinga tuheitia, ki te kingitangi hoki, ka mihi ki te mana whenua. Ka mihi hoki kia tātou katoa, mai nei tēnei ata. Nau mai, piki mai, tahuti mai. Ko Raito tōku maunga, ko Teima tōku awa, ko Cornwall tōku whenua tipuna, ko Bryony James aho. It must be a fairly rare opportunity to have 4 academics from the same family on any panel, and have 4 such accomplished sisters is just gilding the lily. So welcome to Karen, Margaret, Julie and Kim. Now, I could, of course, give a fairly dry rendition of the slightly intimidating academic CVs of these women, but anyone can find that information in about 2 minutes on Google. So rather than that, yesterday I asked each of them to provide a single sentence to describe each of their sisters that I could use as an introduction. So in their own words, I shall introduce them. Karen is an associate professor in dance in the School of Arts at the University of Waikato, and her sisters describe her like this. Karen is a creative practice scholar and a passionate environmentalist. As the eldest, she ventures beyond boundaries but uses her empathetic nature to turn and help others. Karen is a tactful and thoughtful feminist phenomenologist who subtly directs transformation in her discipline for her students and colleagues and for her sisters. Karen has tremendous capacity for empathy and an ability to approach issues from creative and unexpected angles, and that means she asks deep and intriguing questions and offers nuanced responses. Margaret is a professor of plant physiology and dean of science here at Waikato, and in her sister's words, Margaret is an incredibly competent plant physiologist who constantly looks beyond her discipline to generate new questions and understandings in science, but who is also kind, empathetic, and generous. Margaret sees straight to the core of ideas and is able to shrug off distractions to focus on the most interesting bits, by which means she can find solutions where others end up in rabbit holes. Margaret is a committed and visionary plant scientist and the default sister advisor on all gardening and research metrics matters, and she is the best listener. Julie is senior lecturer in linguistics at Waikato, and this is what her sisters have to say about her. Julie works with deep commitment with Vanuatu language communities, has a thorough grasp of ethical practice and giving back through research. She's the best cook and gets stuck with grammatical consulting. Julie is driven by a commitment to record the world's rarest languages before they die out, and in doing so, understand the diversity of what it means to be human. Julie can focus on details with astonishing clarity while also holding a bigger picture in mind that means that those details have purpose and lead to her contributing to community over individual good. And finally, Kim. Kim is a qualitative new media scholar. She's a senior lecturer at the University of Adelaide. We don't quite have the full set. This is how her sisters describe Kim. The only digital native, even Kim's research area of online personas is edgy and cool and very urban. Kim is a provocative thinker and teacher whose research and pedagogies in digital spaces are at the leading edge of the humanities and yet are grounded in common sense. Kim is an expert in new digital research, the most hip and media savvy, great at finding inspirational new music, and has the family award for getting the best job soonest after PhD graduation. So welcome to our wonderful panelists. The upshot of this exercise was a sense that I really felt I wanted to contact your parents immediately and see if there was still room to be adopted, because I want to be a Barbour sister, is pretty much all I can say. So Kim, would you like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where you are now?
Yes, thank you. So I'm joining you from the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and so I acknowledge that they are the traditional custodians of this unceded land. I acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship that the Kaurna people have to country, and respect and value their past, present and ongoing connection to their land and cultural beliefs, and acknowledge the fact that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Thanks.
Thank you, Kim. Excuse me. Now, obviously Slido is open and our audience can ask questions. In the absence of a control group of 4 sisters who were estranged at birth but happened to become academics, a lot of what I would like to ask is impossible to answer. So in the absence of that, we'll just kick off with some conversation starters and then pretty much hand it over to you. So let's kick off with this. Academia, it's a wonderful job. It's a job that is possibly the best in the world, but academia can be a very isolating world. And we're sometimes too busy to consciously nurture the networks that we need to sustain us. Now, each of you have built in 3 amazing, accomplished women that you can go to as supporter, as cheerleader, as sense checker, as sounding board. How much has that influenced your approach to your career?
I'm getting the look here, so I'll start us off.
You're the one who pushes the boundaries.
Right, I'll start and expect that my sisters will jump in. I suppose there are a number of things that I think are really important about this. And maybe before I talk about us, I should just say that my number one tip in the world of academia is to create your own is to create your own group of people around you who you can trust. And we are lucky to have inbuilt people that we trust, but I think it's really important to have those people in this world. So there are a number of things that really offers us. I think we've developed amongst us a lot of institutional knowledge that enables us to share processes and understandings about how to navigate this kind of world that we're in. And I would admit, of course, too, as some of you who know us already know, we have quite a lot of privilege from our family background, who are educators many generations deep, in thinking about institutions and education. And I think we also have a kind of multi or interdisciplinary sounding board that's really valuable. So sometimes we can get quite stuck in our own disciplines and with colleagues that we work closely with, and having someone who sees things quite differently from different paradigms and perspectives is really helpful for all of us. So at this point, someone else from the family will jump in and share an anecdote, perhaps, or something to
Consider
add.
yourselves told. Somebody jump in.
So I guess we have this opportunity to, as you say, sound as a sounding board, and because we're all working in the same field of, the same industry, we can see how others have, how each other has achieved what we've achieved, see it and explore it in depth, because we have that trust to be able to explore it in depth. That allows us to say, well, that's not for me. I can't do it that way because I'm not that adventurous. I'm not that ethically driven as Julie is, for instance. I'm not that cool as Kim is. But maybe I can find a way to learn from that and make it authentic. Because I think that in academia, it's really, you see these sort of cookie cutter ideas of what it is to be an academic, and it's really hard to find your own way and to find your own authentic way of being an academic, and having the opportunity to see it's not just a cookie cutter, this is how you do academia. I've got 3 ways that I can compare myself to, and that allows me to compare myself as a teacher, as well as a researcher, as well as someone who works for the institution that I'm currently employed with here.
So building on that and what Karen said as well around kind of practice knowledge or institutional knowledge, I think that's something that I've really benefited from growing up in a family where I could learn what this job actually is. And so when I was doing my PhD, I had a very good friend who came back to university after a bit of a break to do his PhD at the same time. And about halfway through, he kind of caught me and he was like, this is not what I expected it to be in terms of the lives that the permanent faculty academics were living at that time. And he had in his head this kind of vision of what academia was, or the way that it's portrayed in movies, maybe, where people sit in offices and have deep conversations and have sneaky bottles of port and stuff, and it's tweed and it's leather patches on your elbows, and it's not as much email in those movies and not as much administration. And I think I was kind of like, how did you not know that was what this job was? But of course, he'd never had access to that. And growing up as I have with academics in my family and my sisters and my dad, and we've got a cousin as well. This is all the kind of sense that we know very deeply what different aspects of the job are, and therefore also, like Margaret said, what's achievable for us. So I know that certain types of committee work I'm probably going to be good for, and some that I'm not, because my sisters have been on those committees and have shared what that kind of thing is. So yes, the teaching and research stuff, but all of that other kind of job stuff that goes along with working in a university, I think that having this kind of collection of sisters to share and learn from has been really useful.
Julie commented to me when we were preparing yesterday that she'd be lucky to get a word in edgeways, and apparently that's true. So Julie.
Well, I feel like the others have kind of covered everything already. Maybe I could say that I've probably been a real beneficiary of having sisters who are ahead of me in the system, because I've really been able to watch their experiences, and like Kim was sort of saying, you can pick and choose the bits of the job that are appealing and that you know you can potentially contribute to, and say to other roles, actually that's not something that I would be good at, want the burden of, that kind of thing. Yeah, so that's been a benefit.
Cool. I'd like to come back to something you mentioned at the start, that you are all from different disciplines. And in chatting to you previously and talking about this, what struck me was the incredible awareness you have of each other's discipline. So how have you been able to incorporate the skills and the thought processes from other disciplines into your own research and teaching practice? Because they're quite a disparate set of research disciplines we've got here, and but you all are clued into what every one of the others of you is doing. So tell me about that a bit more.
Shall I? Yeah. So I've always wanted to be a scientist, and since I was 8, and I'm very, very committed to the scientific process and the scientific way of thinking. And did my science thing, science training, am a scientist, and then realised through talking to the others that that's not the only way to approach understanding the world. And that's quite difficult to deal with, actually, when you've committed yourself to a certain way of thinking about the world, that then you say, well, actually, there's other ways to do that. And it's not that I can dismiss them. I can't dismiss this other ways of doing research, for instance, because I know that these guys are clever, they're accomplished, I trust that they're right in their approaches. And so that was quite a what's the word, crisis, really, actually, when I took that into myself as something that I needed to change about myself. I needed to think more broadly, to think outside of my training. And they have helped me to do that. So the way that has changed so it's mostly changed the way I do research, but also a little bit in teaching as well. And so now I'm involved in very, very transdisciplinary projects. I've done some autoethnography, which is like way out there for a scientist. Very challenging. We've got a little paper under preparation, and its title was originally "Is this data?" because that was the question we were asking. How can this be data? How can this be rigorous research when I don't have replication? And so these guys have challenged me to even start approaching that. And I think that's so valuable because, science has been so privileged for so long that we forget there are other ways of doing things, other ways of asking questions, other questions to ask. Mm-hmm. And the only way we're going to deal with the big issues like climate change is to do it together, bringing in all the ideas, including ideas from the disciplines that these guys work in. So having that, the inability to dismiss other ideas because I trust them is really important to that. And that's possible to recreate outside of a family, but I think having a family just makes it so much better, much easier.
Your default setting is to trust them, as opposed to having to learn to trust them.
Yeah.
And I think if I'm allowed to say, may I? Yes, absolutely, because some of the biggest changes that I've made to my my research, and that I'm hoping will carry over to my discipline eventually in a few decades' time, have been driven by my observations of the way that Karen conducts research and the purpose of research. So, and I think this is probably what you were getting at as well, right? That maybe within that, in more scientific traditions, research is about answering questions and report those to the scientific world in a very simplistic sense. Apologies. And linguistics is much the same. We record language data and we report it to each other, and we use lots of really highly technical terminology that you need 3 degrees and a decade to master. But then why? So why are we engaged in these kind of activities? And this is something that watching Karen, whose work necessarily involves community, and who is concerned with questions about equity, fairness. I've taken that approach and sort of looked at what I do and tried to see what I do from her perspective, and it's allowed me to shift everything about the way I do research, from the way that I set up projects to the methodologies that I use with communities to the way that I produce outputs for projects and for the people that I acknowledge as being an audience for my work. So it's no longer just academics that I see as being an audience for my work. It's communities, it's children who want to learn to read in their own languages. We're having one of those moments. Yes.
The real world is intervening to remind us. I think that's a really nice thing to hear said. Thank you, sisters. As a dance researcher who often feels completely alone and unimportant in the academic world. Not because this university or my colleagues necessarily make me feel that way, but because the institution is built on a kind of model of disembodiment and intellectual thinking and cognitive activity, as opposed to the kind of embodied knowledge that is really important to me. But I could have just actually said what Julie said back to her, because and I could say the same thing back to Kim too, in terms of working in the digital context with the ways that people communicate and conduct research and share research back. So what I mean by that is that I think we really learn from each other. And so as I watched Julie thinking about what children may need in learning to read in their own languages, what resources she might, as an academic researcher, be able to develop with community members to help children reading in endangered languages, I think about what the impact of my work is. And so in the arts we often say, oh well, we know we have people in front of us who we impact with our work and who we feel in the moment we can change, but how that ripples on to things that deal with climate change is another question, or things that deal with community well-being in a really tangible, measurable kind of way, Bryony. That's quite challenging to articulate, but we trust in it, we believe in it. So I wonder whether that sense of belief and the support that we have for each other to keep believing in the value of the work that we do, no matter how different or sometimes, in my case, obscure it might seem. I sometimes feel my work's obscure, and yet, in an academic context, right? And yet, I also know there are people in front of me, and we all know this. When we work in the research we do, we can see the change happening in the immediate context we're working with, or perhaps see it come through social media feeds and things, Kim. So, yeah, it's that sort of sense of supporting each other to believe that we can make a difference in the work that we do in a context that perhaps in the general public can sometimes feel a little bit distant from immediate impact. We know we can each have an impact. Yeah.
Kim, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I guess for me, all of those things. I guess I also have had this wonderful experience of being able to claim my sisters, which has happened for everybody. I've had this moment of I was applying for a research position, and I got to the end of the interview process. She was very professional about it, with a contemporary dance academic and choreographer, and she kind of said, okay, great, it'd be lovely to have you on board. Now, are you related to Karen? And then when I got the job here on my second day, somebody came into my office and said, now, do you know Julie? And then with Margaret, somebody came up, I think I was talking about her, and they went, wait, you mean Margaret Barbour? And so there's this kind of sense that we have these kind of connections to other parts of the university and academia more broadly. I guess as well, the watching and growing up with my sisters has driven some of my research. So both my master's and my PhD work looked at artistness and artistic integrity. And those were built out of my kind of interest in Karen as the elder sister who was, and still is, if I'm honest, a little bit kind of very definitely a role model, somebody that I wanted to emulate, but not being particularly artistically inclined, I approached it from another angle. And the comm stuff, I did one of the wonderful degrees that I don't know if it's still going, a Bachelor of Communication Studies at Waikato. And the idea that linguistics was a part of that program then, although I took it under the late Terry Crowley, was certainly really kind of essential to understanding the way that the world works and thinking about language and digging into some of those ideas. And then just having access to somebody who is working from a very different paradigm to me in terms of science has, I guess, the kind of parallel streams and they overlap and mesh a lot. And internet studies are around whether it's qualitative or quantitative, whether it's big data stuff where you're doing, you know, crunching numbers and all of that kind of stuff, or whether you're doing what I do, which is kind of more sociological, ethnographic stuff. And so do you, you know, having access to people who work with numbers and data sets allows me to see value in that where I might be a little bit more dismissive because I'm not a big data person. I like to deal with an amount of data that I can contain in my head. Yeah.
Brilliant. I'm going to go to some of the questions that are coming in from people who are dialed into this. And I'm going to start with this one, and forgive the emphasis that I'm going to put on this because it's going to reflect possibly my experience. Did sibling rivalry not exist in your family? But the question goes on, or did it function in positive ways rather than negative ones that made each of you strive harder?
We weren't allowed to fight.
But also you'll notice that we did choose different disciplines.
You're the real black sheep, aren't you?
It's okay. It's all right that we've got a scientist in the family. We don't hold it against her. She's not a black sheep at all because she's actually the leading academic in the family. So
she's done very well.
She's
with
the model
science.
of success, actually.
When I was speaking to your sisters and you couldn't make it to the pre-meeting meeting for this meeting. You said, oh, Margaret can't make it. No, everyone else is on Zoom. And I said, so about this sibling rivalry thing. And I can't remember which of you it was, but one of you went, yeah, well, only one of us have had a grant from NASA.
I think that's the thing, though. I mean, we've come to really appreciate that we understand success in really different ways, and that we can celebrate each other's success without necessarily feeling that we need to compete with it. Although perhaps as the eldest I have a different perspective. So I guess I always felt like our disciplines were so completely different and what we sought and aimed for was so completely different that there wasn't a need to compete. We have lots of shared interests, but we're working in really different fields. And as kids, I don't remember.
We weren't allowed to fight.
Well, no, we weren't allowed to fight, but I don't remember us being competitive as kids either. But perhaps you two can speak more about that.
I think we should ask Kim.
Kim.
So I'm in a slightly weird position in that not important number of years between me and my elder sisters.
Nicely done.
Not important in terms of counting them, although important to the story. Meant that I spent a lot of my childhood with closer to 4 mothers than a mum and 3 older sisters, which is a joke that I've had running for a long time and does a disservice to our mother's wonderfulness generally. Hi, Mum. Also, there was no need for me to compete because I was, in primary school when Karen was in university and as an undergrad. And so for me, it wasn't about competitiveness. At one stage, I did have this great plan that I would be the least educated and highest earning member of my family.
I remember that.
With a bachelor's degree. That was my plan, right? Was to finish out with a bachelor's degree and kind of get a fancy corporate job and wear pencil suits and stilettos and organise parties. But it turns out that I'm uniquely unsuited to doing all of those things. And so I went into the family business instead. But I think the competitiveness is about being inspired by one another to do different things, and to, I guess, I'm horrifyingly ambitious in a way that I think not everybody is, or really doesn't need to be either, because then they get in my way. But I do enjoy being able to kind of compare myself at my kind of trajectory in my program rather than seniority and in equivalent time, and go, yeah, you know what, I did get a PhD in very little time and then a job straight after. And, you know, the others didn't.
I had a feeling there might be a different answer.
In reflection to that, there's a question here that says, are there secret sister signals that you use to help keep each other out of trouble?
Well, so Julie and I are very, very close in age, and have always been quite close. Growing up, we were very close, and so we have, we can, when we're doing charades or Pictionary, we do very well. So yes.
Yeah. We were a little team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But we've spent more of our lives apart now than we have together. So it's amazing to have Margaret back. We feel like we've got her back. And actually, lockdown kind of gave us Kim back as well, which was really nice. And we've kind of kept it going. So it's nice to, we talk a lot more than we used to.
Good.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a question here for Kim precisely. It says, Kim, what do we need to do to get you here at Waikato?
I can give you a job title that I'll accept.
Okay, that's cool. Maybe just don't attach a salary to it, and we're fine.
No, look, I think I will probably at some point, looking at tomorrow's forecast high of 37 degrees, be a climate refugee at some point in the next 5 to 10 years. So if there was a job at Waikato, that'd be great. Just putting it out there. Future plan.
Reflecting on your answer to the sibling rivalry question there, though, I think what's encapsulated there is something that speaks a lot to what the purpose of the New Zealand Women in Leadership programme is about as well. To celebrate other people's success in no way ever detracts from your own. And you've just encapsulated it for us. So thank you for that. That was quite... It's just a delight to hear it, to be honest.
And we do actually get extremely excited when somebody has a big success.
Yeah. You must spend quite a lot of your time excited then, because you're all ridiculously accomplished. I mean,
well,
okay.
We probably could add in there too that we know each other as sisters, obviously, perhaps in different ways that other close friends do. And we share not just the successes, but the failures too. And so we all know that behind all of the successes we might see that we have, there are many disasters and failures and things that just didn't fly and weren't the right time and were completely
totally trashed.
And reviewers hated, ripped apart by peers, you know.
Yes.
And we've found ways of, I guess, talking each other through those things, and I guess our different disciplinary perspectives help that too, you know. So sometimes I've been quite horrified at the nature of comments, and someone's been able to offer a really useful explanation about the different perspective that the reviewer or the peer is coming from, that means that that helps me understand some of these rejections. So when you work in the arts, and we're, all across the board being encouraged so strongly to pursue external funding, when you work in the arts, this is kind of, in the realm of miracles, not just blue skies, but miracles, to think that you can get that kind of funding. So consoling me through rejections is something that my sisters are good at too. So I suppose I just want to say that that supporting each other and celebrating the successes is really important, but also being able to talk through the disappointments of this job, and there are many that other people don't see, that we've all experienced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a good reflection. A whole bunch of questions have just disappeared off Slido, so I'll see what I can recall from there. Oh, this is an important one, again, for the context of the New Zealand Women in Leadership Symposium we find ourselves in. Have any of you come up against barriers in your discipline simply because you're a woman? Let me rephrase that. Tell me about the barriers you have come across in your discipline simply because you're a woman.
I will pick up on this one. So I'm a field linguist, which involves going to, in the particular work that I do, remote tropical islands. My barrier was actually entering the discipline. So when I finished my master's degree, I got a master's degree from Auckland. I didn't want to do anything other than field work from the time that I met Terry Crowley, who was a field linguist. That's what I wanted to do. Went to Auckland, thought that's my best chance of getting into this. And when I asked about options, it was just, oh, no. And that was it. And I said, I'm really keen to do a PhD. Oh, well, there's really not that many opportunities. Oh, sorry, the funding round for, we do have scholarships, but let me check. No, it's just closed, sorry. So they were so disorganised and so uninterested in building, growing the discipline, in inviting in people who, as it turns out, want to change the discipline and make a difference to people. And it was, that doesn't, the people who were involved in that at Auckland University are no longer there, I will just add, and I'm sure it's a very fine institution that now does great things to support their graduate students. However, at the time when I was there, it was even entering a discipline, doing something which had been traditionally an activity dominated by men, and even now the conversational threads that are under discussion, topics under discussion, it's all men who are leading them. You don't put in any comments unless you're a retired female professor, and then it's okay to add a little bit of a something in. And I don't mean to sound really aggressively angry about it, but there are barriers, and those barriers won't move on until those men move on. That's my view.
Fair comment. Any comment from the others on that particular aspect?
Well, I work in a discipline in dance research that's dominated by women. In the professional world, it hasn't been the case that funding and senior roles necessarily go to women. But in the academic world, it's very much women have been the innovators. So I haven't faced that in my discipline particularly. Margaret, do you want to comment here before we let Kim race off?
So, well, science has been traditionally completely men. Biology is a little bit different, so I'm a biologist, and biology is different. But when you get to the upper levels of, associate professor and professor, in the faculty that I was in at the University of Sydney, there wasn't any female professors. That has now changed completely, partly because of structural changes, but also because there was a process in place to mentor women to be able to apply, to be willing and able to apply. So the barriers were removed for me, and I was lucky in my timing. And it was recognised that, this is a really big problem. We need to put something in place to remove this barrier. And so I was, like I say, lucky in timing, and that I was there to take advantage of that barrier being removed. Yeah.
Kim, what have you got to add to this particular question?
So I guess for me, again, internet studies is I don't know if it's female dominant, but certainly most of the leading scholars that I deal with and whose work I use, whether that's by choice or because it is the best, are women, and they're young women, and they're often queer women. And that means that as a field, there are lots of ways in which I'm quite welcome. And I certainly don't think that I've necessarily hit a barrier that I couldn't ignore, but sometimes I ignore them.
Mm.
Yeah.
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 Mm. Coming back to what you just said there, Margaret, about there were hurdles that were removed for you. A couple of questions here reflect on the success that you've each had in your own careers. What are your plans for the future, or indeed what you're doing now, to pay it forward and remove hurdles for the people who are coming on next?
Well, just so we'll be setting up a mentoring system to, it will be for everyone, because there hasn't been a mentoring system in place in the school that I'm Dean of. I take a special interest in I've got some amazing women. I mean, you saw Shari just before, amazing. And I take a special interest in them. They don't need my help, many of them, but some of them do, so I'm quite happy to do that. But I do think mentoring is really important, and mentoring when it comes to promotion, I think is super important, because, I mean, I know it's a cliche, but women don't apply for promotion until they're absolutely ready. Men have a go. I know that's a horrible generalisation, but, you know. But I do think if there's ways you can sort of say, well, you know, it's time, you're ready. I can see you're ready. Let me help you get there. That's the kind of thing that I think I can do. I mean, participating in these kind of sessions is really important as well. Showing that it can be done in different ways. Yeah.
Yep. Any comments from the others?
I think I agree with Margaret, and even when we're not in positions like you are as a dean and able to implement systems like that, I think there's so much we can do informally that's really helpful. And that can be as simple as forwarding emails for opportunities that come up to people, to say, hey, this sounds like you would be interested in this, or I think you should have a go for this, you know. I think there are a whole lot of really informal, friendly, collegial things that we can be doing, and that's not a very good answer, is it? Really?
Just because it's common sense doesn't mean it's not right. So
yeah,
it is common sense,
yeah.
and we as women we all know that, but sometimes, again, it's part of being a really busy academic. It's quite easy to forget that. So actually stating that obvious. I saw a fantastic quote today about, you often hear people say, you need to send the ladder back down for people. And the answer to this quote was, bugger the ladder. We need to send down a fishing net and all of us grab a hold of the corners and haul up all the women at once. So no, there's common sense stuff that bears repeating and repeating and repeating. So thank you.
There's something else in there too, though, Bryony, and that is that constant reference to the hierarchy, the hierarchical structures. So we talk about leaving the ladder down, and I do believe in those things. And one of the keynote speakers yesterday talked really beautifully about this. But I also think that that if we keep seeing those hierarchical positions as the status quo, instead of thinking about how we transform at the ground level. So creative thinking is the thing that I love doing most, and I really like grassroots projects, and I really like grounded theory, and these all work together. I really like thinking about the personal as the political, and so all of this comes together for me in thinking that that actually it's the stuff that we do on the level with each other and at the ground level often. So leaving the ladder down's one metaphor, but reaching out to the people right next to us is another one. Yeah. So I feel like we could be doing a lot more reaching out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Kim.
I think we can also look at kind of structural things, and this might take all of us acting rather than just some of us, right, or individuals. Let's not take personal responsibility for structural problems. Let's fix the structure or dismantle the structure, right? So we work in a system which privileges individual brilliance, and that's great. The four of us have been in different ways successful at doing that. and at working within those structures. But equally, the people who succeed best in that, and I take the thesis whisperer here, she calls them academic arseholes, right? So people, I call them silverbacks. Yeah, chest beating, resource hungry, people who talk loud and take up lots of space, right? And we cannot individually take responsibility for that, but the system will change when the silverbacks are out, right? And at Adelaide, that's feeling quite potent at the moment, given the kind of public news recently.
Yeah, we have to wait for them, but we also can't breed more silverbacks
exactly.
to replace them.
We have to stop supporting and putting up with, tolerating that kind of behaviour at an institutional level, right? Because it's not just about each one of us individually standing up. We need to do that too when we can and when we have the capacity and when that's a safe thing for us to do. But also the systems need to change because, I heard a great quote the other day that leadership won't change until leaders do, right? So as long as we keep promoting and privileging the same types of people as an institution, the more the system stays entrenched.
Yep. Julie, do you have anything to add to that?
Not that it's appropriate for me to discuss right now.
That seems entirely fair. Yeah, okay. There's a sticker on the fridge in the tea room back at the office that says, don't forget to wash your hands, wear a mask, and disestablish the patriarchy. So there's a question here that I particularly want to ask, because, of course, the New Zealand Women in Leadership programme is for academic and professional and general staff. So what has the role been in your careers of the professional staff within academia, as well as your academic colleagues, but the incredible general staff that actually seem to bear the place up?
Can I respond?
Dive on in.
So I was at the University of Sydney, as I mentioned, and about 3 or 4 years ago, they changed the way that the professional staff were, how their careers were built and how their careers progressed. And what it meant was that academics were, maybe for the first time in that rather antiquated institution, forced to work in close collaboration with the professional staff. And that was the way I always wanted to work, so it suited me perfectly. So when I had the opportunity to, I had to have an office on main campus as well as the other campus I was working at, blah, 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 because I had to do the Associate Dean role. I sat with the research manager for the faculty, the professional role, and we worked together, we were a team. That made my life easier. It made her life easier. She could do her role at a much higher level, and she could see that there was this career progression for her. She could see somewhere that she was going. I think there has to be this level of respect between, and it can't be two camps. We all have to work together for the good of the institution. And if professional staff are seen as, just supporting the academic staff, no, that's not going to work. We all have to be working together. So that's something that all institutions, I think, should look at and work on, because when you have really strong, really competent professional staff, the whole institution will work better. You can't just rely on academics. I am terrible at processes. Absolutely, it's not my thing at all. With the professional staff that I have, they're good at processes. I should trust them to do that, to help me co-create the processes that run the unit that I'm working with at the time. So absolutely, we need to mentor our professional staff to do the best job that they can do as well. Yeah.
Cool.
I'm a little surprised by the question, because I find the professional staff are fantastic. And
I don't think the question implied anything else. I think it was just focusing our attention on the fact that sometimes when you get a bunch of academics sitting together chatting, we chat about academics.
Yeah.
And I think this person was quite rightly reminding us, hey, we're just one part of this whole
there's a whole other world out there that facilitates our activities, organises us quite often, manages the things that we need. I agree completely that these are people who we collaborate with. I don't see the professional staff. That's the new term, is it?
It is, yeah.
That's a nice term. I don't see the professional staff.
Well, it implies that academics are the unprofessional staff, which suits me
probably
fine.
actually right.
That's about right. Yeah. Well, I'm really aware of my limitations, and this is a year in which I've had to face my limitations quite up front in adjusting to online learning and teaching environments, and I can't do the things that I need to be able to do without working in collaboration with professional staff, and I just have to acknowledge the really amazing technical staff, particularly in this building and around campus, who can work with us when we're trying to do artistic research, particularly who have skill sets, whether it's editing, Oliver, or whether it's people working here in this building who make it possible to do things, and I can't work without them because I don't have those skill sets. And so I agree with you that collaboration is really, really important. And it goes all the way through the systems. The number of new systems we've all had to adjust to this year in working online, and over the last 4 or 5 years in this institution particularly, and I'm sure it's like this in other institutions around the country and in Australia too, whole piles of new systems we've had to learn in quite a short period of time. And the people who design those are incredible. They've got skill sets I can't even imagine. So, I think it's absolutely crucial.
Cool. I'm going to move on to another question, simply because there's all sorts of interesting questions. I'm going to kick this one off with Kim. In yesterday's development session of the symposium, we spoke about imposter syndrome. And there's a related question here. Do you have a mantra that keeps you strong when you face insecurities? So I'll start with you, Kim. I suspect imposter syndrome's not been a big feature of your life, just guessing, but I don't know you, so maybe I'm overstepping, but then we'll move on.
Look, it's not something that I have to deal with at the same level that I know a lot of people do. I, for a long time, used when I was feeling uncertain about something, like to come back to that great throwaway line, "Live like a mediocre white man," which allowed me to apply for promotion 18 months into my first decade. Despite not quite meeting all of the criteria. I didn't think it, just to be clear. It was like 2 rounds later that I actually got up. I guess that has been the closest thing I've ever had to a mantra. Live with the confidence of a mediocre white man. Okay, that's... On the internet, if you want to be shouty about it, but in real life.
I can sense there's another sticker about to appear on the B Block fridge, so thank you for that. I don't know if any of you can actually add anything.
So I have one which is just, I can do hard things.
Okay.
Yeah, it's nice and simple. Not very political or PC, but...
That's entirely...
And it's helpful for students too. I used to teach a lab where it was really difficult. They needed to really stick in there and be persistent. And so I'd write up on the whiteboard at the beginning of the class, I can do hard things. And it seemed to help, let me put it that way. It helps me and it helped them. Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of what I think I probably ask myself over and over, what is important to me? What is important to me? Is this thing that's happened, is that important to me? Can I set it aside and focus on what's important to me? What do I value? And try to hold on to the things that allow me to feel good about myself and my job and to sleep at night. So that's a slightly different take than live like a mediocre white man, but I may try to apply that on occasion too. That's good.
Karen.
I'm not sure. I have phases where I think affirmations and, inspirational talks and things are useful. I think one of the things that I do come back to is, what's the bigger picture here? And that sounds really boring compared to Kim's stunning statement. But sometimes you can get really lost in the detail of things, and I have to think, what's the bigger picture here? And the answer to that on any given day could be, I need to be well enough to get up and make my son's porridge in the morning. Or it could be, actually, this is part of how we think about how our community responds to climate change in the future. Or it could be, I'm part of a family who has this particular commitment that I'm going to keep honouring. So I think thinking about the bigger picture is quite useful, because the detail, especially administrative detail, can kind of swallow me up sometimes. And sometimes feeling like the arts world is, or arts practice is less important than everything else, can swallow me up too. And I have to think, well, what's the bigger picture here? If there's children in front of me smiling, or if there's a community of people who come along and feel slightly different about the world after seeing this performance, that's the bigger picture. It's still worthwhile. So seeing that bigger picture is important. But maybe I'll just revert to Kim's one for a while and try that too.
As a mediocre white man. A good question here that came in quite early on in the piece, but I think it's been reinforced throughout some of these answers. It's clear that you all have a wonderful sense of humour. Is that something you got from your parents or each other?
Sometimes we don't realise.
I got in trouble when I was 8 at school, and thankfully the teacher who actually, maybe I was 7, the teacher who knew that I had older sisters who were in their late teens actually at that point, when I was at primary school, and so dealt with it differently. I got in trouble for bullying, and I was being sarcastic. But it turns out your average 7-year-old who doesn't have teenage siblings doesn't understand sarcasm. So I absolutely got my sense of humour from my sisters.
I think, I don't know, but I don't know whether it comes from our parents. I'm inclined to say maybe not.
We do like to make each other laugh.
We do.
We do take particular pleasure in posting something funny on our WhatsApp chat.
Yep.
That we know will make the others laugh.
Right.
Plus,
I will say.
What's that, Kim?
Mum is quite witty.
Oh yes. Yeah. With Mum, it's often accidental.
Yes. Which makes it even funnier.
Yes.
So maybe we do.
Yeah, maybe we do.
Yeah.
Sort of a quick fire round, because we're going to be running out of time soon. What's the best thing about having 3 sisters? We might compliment that with what's the worst thing later, but we'll start with the best thing. Okay, so what's the best thing about having 3 sisters?
Clothes and shoes. I know that sounds horrible.
I was going to say hand-me-downs.
Yeah.
And now that we're older, I think sharing a glass of wine
Yes.
is a really good thing about sisters.
Yeah.
Sometimes virtually, but even still, yeah.
I'm going to just go out there on a limb and say unconditional love.
I know everybody's going to tear up, so we're just going to have to move on.
I've been thinking a lot about unconditional love, and there's not so many relationships that we have in the world that are unconditional, and I think sisters is one of them.
I refer to my opening statement. I want to be a Barbour sister.
Well, put in your application. We'll consider it.
Oh, but reviewer 3 will just torpedo it, because they always do.
Double blind review, and we'll check your age index first.
I'm not even going to ask what's the worst thing about having sisters, because clearly with you lot there isn't a bad side to this.
Clothes and shoes.
Clothes.
Too many opinions on clothes and shoes.
Just to share with the people who weren't here when this happened and have dialed in subsequently, that Karen and Julie were here and we were chatting, and they go, where's Margaret? Where's Margaret? Then Margaret walked in, and both of them almost in unison went, "Oh, she's won the shoe battle then." How has your leadership style changed over time?
Completely.
That's a good start. Maybe
Yeah.
you'd like to flesh that out a little.
So I went on I was very fortunate that people have invested in me to learn to be a leader. I'm not sure what they saw because I wasn't a leader, but they thought that I might have some potential. And so what has changed is that I've found a way, I'm still learning, but I've found that I can be authentic to myself, but also persuade people that the way I see, the way I want to go is the right way, as in being a leader, right? So seeing that there's opportunities that I could take and people might have faith in me, and finding an authentic way to perform that leadership, if you like. That's happened, it's still happening, but over, sort of 7 years that's sort of developed, and it will continue for as long as I have an opportunity to be a leader. Yeah. So I don't think it's like you suddenly, okay, now I'm a leader. No, I think you need to still grow and still question yourself and your own capacity, your own, abilities and capabilities to lead people. Yeah. I never ever thought that, if someone said to me 20 years ago, oh, you'll be the Dean of Science, I would have said, oh, don't be stupid, And yet, here I am, which is weird. So it's completely evolving over time, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The rest of you, how's your leadership changed? Julie?
I think I'm probably much more aware of there being people out there from all different backgrounds and experiences who have something to share and to offer, and I look for ways to make room for them in the spaces that I participate in. So even people who might not have ever considered themselves academically oriented, I maybe see something in them and try and invite them into this space, and just to celebrate all of the amazing things that the different people around us have to offer. I think everyone has something to offer. So for me, being a good leader is finding what people have to offer and allowing them to shine in their own space and in ways that contribute to a bigger picture.
We have 2 minutes left, so Kim, Karen, how's your leadership evolved? Is evolving. Evolved is the wrong word. How is it evolving?
I guess what I'm trying to do is become more inclusive, which kind of, I guess, reflects the others as well. But, as we said at the start, we're a pretty privileged bunch in terms of our access to all sorts of things. And there are plenty of people who would do, fantastic work if they had the same opportunities that we have had. And so I guess my job is sometimes stepping back and letting them do that, but also sponsoring people. So not just, supporting people to do things for themselves, but saying the right person for this position, the right person to do this job is this person. Or, hey, undergrad in your second year, you have an extraordinary brain. And you're a first generation student, and so nobody's ever told you that before, but you need to be doing more of what you're doing.
Karen?
I think I speak less. I've learned that if you're going to go with people somewhere new, you all have to go together, which means there has to be space for everybody to speak, which means if you think that you're the leader, whether you are or not, you have to say less, because actually you want everyone to be on board. So it is all about being in the same waka and working together. So yeah, I think my leadership has become a lot less white privileged feminist and a lot more sitting back and listening so that other people can have a voice. So I guess I am saying the same thing as my sisters, really.
I think that is a perfect comment on which to end this particular panel. I don't doubt if you open the application process, there's probably, how many people have enrolled? You're going to get 210 applications to be Barbour Sisters, so you will have to have a very rigorous screening process, but yeah, not that I control the internal funding in this organisation, but I would like to point out that, you know, so
Can I say one other thing, Bryony, and that is, how about just making a sisters group yourselves? Because I really think that there's such value in this. We might be sisters, but what about finding your peers from other disciplines and making your own sisters groups? So let's have a whole lot of sisters.
We can certainly try, and the sisterhood is powerful, but the unconditional love that you guys quite clearly hold for each other is really going to reduce a whole bunch of people to tears if I don't shut up now. So I'm going to shut up, and the weird thing about this all being virtual is not going to be a huge standing ovation, but everybody in this room is now going to applaud because this was fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And on that note, Bryony, I just want to let you know when you leave the office, there will be security that escorts you because you have 210 people who want to adopt you. So there will be, you know, ball and chain so that we can make sure that we can keep you here. Bryony, thank you very much for facilitating this session. Julie, Margaret, Karen and Kim from Adelaide, thank you so much. It's been fantastic to hear you speak today. When we sat together as an organising committee and this topic came up, I was very excited and I emailed Julie, Margaret and Karen, and I was in a very serious meeting with Margaret when she told me, you do know that there's a fourth sister, right? And you know that moment in time when your heart wants to stop and leap all at the same time because you know you've just very badly stuffed up, but you're so excited because there's an opportunity coming. So that was me when we had this conversation. So thank you so much for everybody that's joined this morning. Kim, I know it's very early for you over in Adelaide, but thank you very, very much. And then, Bryony, you and I have a prize to give. L'Oreal, who has sponsored us, has got some fantastic baskets that I don't have a picture of, but they are there. And so I will hand over to you the next winner to announce, please.
So the next winner of the L'Oreal Ginormous Hamper is Heather Finn from Victoria University.
Fabulous.
Well done, Heather.
Congratulations, Heather. That'll be out to you soon. And then just to wrap up, next we will have a short alumni video that will play while we just get Dr. Shelley Spiller online. And so we'll see you very soon, back in 3. Thank you.
Leadership is about knowing what direction that you're going in, and that's really difficult because there's, depending on what role someone has, there's a lot of different ways forward that people can go, and there's a lot of places that you can go. So I think it's really difficult to first get that kind of where am I heading and why am I heading there, but once you've got that, if you can start to articulate that and see the value that other people bring to you to aid you to move forward, and see the value that you can then bring to them as you lead them to this direction. So for me, it's about knowing where you want to go, how you get there, and the value that you add to the people that you're working with and the value that they add to you. But there are a number of issues that being a female has, particularly in the tertiary sector, that echoes in other sectors as well, and that just there aren't very many of us. So one of the issues that I have is that when I look around at people higher up than me, I don't see myself. And I find that really difficult because it's like I want to be able to see myself, and I want to be able to ensure that when people are looking up at me and the people at my level, that they see themselves. And that doesn't matter actually what gender it is or what race it is. You just want people to be able to recognise themselves in those people that are leading. So in order to do that, I think one of the key things that's a real issue and a challenge for women, I think, is to really know who they are, and to not believe that in order to be a leader that they have to then become who they see around themselves, because often you don't see yourself, and so you start to believe that in order to be a leader you need to be like the people that you see, and so you stop being yourself. So I think that's a massive challenge for women, is to recognise who they are, recognise who they want to be, and understand that they don't have to become who they see around them in order to be a strong and really good leader. So I think that that's specifically true in education because there just aren't that many females around. I attended in the very first year, which is a long time ago now, and I've come a long way since I started the program. But it was the very first time that I could just think about myself, think about what I was doing and how I was doing things. And that actually set me off in ensuring that I actually thought about what I did more rather than just finding myself somewhere and going, oh goodness, what am I doing now? Which is why I went on the program in the first place, because I'd found myself somewhere and I was going, I don't know what to do. And someone said to me, there's this program, you know? And so, yeah, it's allowed me to just ensure that I reflect more, I think about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and where do I want to go. And that those first realizations that was really important came from the NZUWiL program.
Welcome back. Wasn't that a fantastic session? For those of you that weren't in the studio, it was amazing. The vibrancy, the laughter, it was such a good session. Thank you for joining us for that. Next up, Dr. 𝗀𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀, Professor at the Waikato Management School and also the Associate Dean Māori. She's going to tell us about her highlights and observations of the symposium. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Dr. 𝗀𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀.
Kia ora, Hanlie. Tēnā koutou. E noho nei I runga I te paipai tapu o tō tātou ki ngi tuheitia. Rauranga terama, tēnā koutou I te kaupapa o te rānei, kei te mihi mahana ki a koutou katoa. Ko taumutu te maunga, ko mangatahi te moana, ko mangapoike te awa, ko ngā te kahununu ki wairo te iwi, ko 𝗀𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀𝘀 taku ingoa. Kia ora everyone, it's my pleasure to reflect on the highlights and provide some observations from the last 2 days and what a magnificent couple of days it's been. And I really want to do this as a visual journey, so I've pulled together some images to help reflect collectively on what this journey has been for us over the last 2 days. So I'm going to share my screen and hopefully you can all see that okay. So I want to start with this logo that's been gifted to us, this beautiful logo that Farah described and Rawenia Higgins and Megan Hall gifted. So it just creates two deities, Papa Tuanuku, Mother Earth, and Hine Nui Te Po, Goddess of the Night. And when I saw this, I thought, what a magnificent umbrella and korowai, a cloak to hold us in. And for me, it evoked the ruahine, the woman who moves between worlds. Rua meaning two, and hine, woman. So this idea of women who traverse worlds, who work in the spaces in between the spiritual and the material, work, community, juggling families and careers. So many ways that we have heard stories in the last 2 days about women who work as ruahine in the world, as do each of us. It also really speaks to mana, and that came up several times as well. Mana being our authority, dignity, and sovereignty, and the way that we move in the world through humility, quietly. And it's not so much what we accomplish, but what we are in service of. And then hua, of abundance, of generosity, and of bearing fruit. And right throughout this logo, there's a sense of movement and the journeys that we're on. And I'm going to pick up some of these themes as I traverse the highlights of our time together. The first really began with Neil Quigley, our Vice-Chancellor at the University of Waikato, and he talks about saying that authenticity is really important and to find our own leadership style. And during the last couple of days, that's been reinforced by many of our speakers, Theresa Gattung and the Barbour Sisters, to be true to ourselves, not a cookie cutter, but to find our own way of being authentic. But as many of us know, it can be really messy and tangled. There are so many challenges to speak up, to stand up, to have a voice, and to find that courage that is something that we discover on the path. And we've heard from women who faced many challenges, overcame them as they've broken down barriers and created history. And as Theresa said this morning, she's experienced the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows. We also heard about anxiety, feeling safe, feeling like an imposter, that we oftentimes are our own barrier. And we heard experiences of leaders as they navigated the extraordinary year that has been 2020. So authenticity isn't something we can just pull out as an essentialized thing inside of us, but we are tested along the way, which shapes us. And as Māori Marsden, the philosopher, the tohunga, has said, it's the journey of becoming that's most important. And that we've heard that in many of the stories, this journey of becoming. And during lockdown, I did a lot of seminars and webinars, and one of those series I participated in was with the poet David Whyte. And David Whyte had this beautiful expression that, you know, he encouraged us to meet the stranger within us, that stranger that is often deeply buried within, the person we are becoming but have yet to meet. And that's the true potential of becoming our authentic selves. And it starts with us. And I have this quote from Buckminster Fuller, which I thought really captured some of the conversations and the reflections that were taking place. I live on earth at present, and I don't know what I am, but I know that I am not a category. I am not a thing, a noun. I seem to be a verb, an evolutionary process, an integral function of the universe. And we heard stories of women who refused to be boxed into a category or to fill a quota, but to really back ourselves and move forward as a person who is on this journey of becoming. And on that journey of discovery, it can be very difficult. You know, in some ways, that word discover means to literally break up, you know, to be uncomfortable, that something is fragmenting and shifting, but in that fragmenting, new shafts of light can shine through and we can gain new perspective. But it's not the most comfortable place to be. As Robyn said this morning of Brené Brown's work, it can be quite cringy, but it means that in that fragmenting, we can see new possibilities for ourselves. And this takes us to the notion that I've been exploring in some of my work more recently on leadership and authenticity around this leadership vibe, that as we unfold and go on that journey of becoming, we experience more of our own self, our changing self, those strangers within us that we are meeting and that we settle into our own vibe. So we're made up of multitudes, you know, there's many channels and frequencies of ourselves, but it's what we pay attention to that's most important. And I really enjoyed listening to Theresa talking about paying attention to our strengths and going on that journey of individuation. And this brought me to reflecting on the word leadership from a Te Ao Māori perspective. That word rangatira is a word that's closely associated with leadership. And if you look at it, you can see there are several ways of describing it. That first one, rangatira, which means raranga to plait or to weave, and tira, the group. So in this sense of leadership, to be a leader is to rangatira, to weave a group of people together. And this isn't like some kind of puppeteer who's pulling the strings and making people do the weaving. No, this is leadership that creates the conditions whereby everybody is an important thread in the whole, that everybody is part of the fabric of a community, lending their own specialness, expertise, and effort. And in that sense, each and every one of us is a leader, that we move forward at different times to express leadership and move back at other times. So it's really about creating the spaces where people can express their leadership as a movement through time. So it's not just about the now people, us in this present moment, but acknowledging our ancestors and our future generations, that we are in service through our weaving, we're in service of the future generations where success is succession. It also involves working with tension, because weaving is about finding that right fit and balance. So it's not always smooth sailing or smooth weaving, as it were, but really working with those tensions and those challenges. But what I really heard time and time again was the power of team, the power of collaboration, the power of the collective and the network, and joining with each other. The other way of looking at this word comes from Whaioro's Pere, and she describes it as Rā Ngāti Rā. So Rā meaning light, Ngāti to belong, and Rā to the light. And that we are all, each and every one of us, Rā, light beings who belong to Te Ao Marama, the world of light. And in this beautiful description of what Rā Ngāti Rā is, each and every one of us is a beacon of life. Each and every one of us has inherent dignity, worth. And we heard that come through as well, that divine womanhood, love and aroha, wairua, spirit, and good energy. And in the session we've just had, which was just so full of humour and laughter and joy, which I really appreciated, the Barbour sisters just gave us such wonderful insight into sisterhood and being connected. And I just wanted to, as I thought about what they were saying, I want to reflect on Pauline Gray from the faculty of, the Division of Management. Pauline described whanaungatanga in such a beautiful way. I thought I'd share it with you this morning. So she talks about, so whanaungatanga broadly means relationships, but she described how in the beginning you've got O, so the orange in the first explanation there, and that came through. So O meaning self, me, I, and that came through a lot in the stories of the women that have shared so generously these last couple of days, that it's really important to take care of our personal well-being, our mental well-being. That sometimes, especially this year, there's been a sense of tiredness and exhaustion, and we must put ourselves into the well-being mix and take care of ourselves first. And also for our families, our whānau, the importance that our whānau as well, and that we have to manage these relationships and make sure they're okay and that we're okay as well, because whānau are the building blocks of our society, and having healthy whānau is very important. And then whanaunga, the sense of wider kinship, our systems, including the communities that we belong to as it ripples out. And then whanaungatanga, which is very much about the circle of connection, support, and also compassion. And we had a great discussion yesterday on compassion, and it was brought up again this morning. And the real sense, and I love this quote by the Dalai Lama, that compassion is the radicalism of our time, that kindness, empathy, respect, and support is a gift to ourselves and to others. And Theresa highlighted our intersectionality, non-duality, our non-binary humanness beyond the outdated, stereotyped, dominant ideas of what constitutes effective leadership. And we heard stories of women leaders, and this is such a wonderful photo of a moment in time, but women who are at the forefront of leadership across many frontiers, from politics to health, Māori iwi and communities, to our own education sector. Women leaders who are incisive, clear, kind and caring. And what I really love about this photo is that young boy there looking up, and just what wonderful role modelling is going on for him in that moment. And then as I was thinking about these incredible stories of women who have really pushed through these different barriers and overcome challenges, it reminded me of some years ago when I was at a leadership awards ceremony, and it was the Māori Business Leaders Awards. And the first woman who received her awards, who worked in the government sector, and she said, oh, I really like staying within the lines. That's, I really get a lot of satisfaction without that. And then the next woman who came up to receive her award said, oh, I like working outside the lines, outside the boundaries. And then when Mavis Mullins, who's in the New Zealand Hall of Business Fame, came up to take the Preeminent Award, Mavis said with a cheeky laugh, "I draw the lines." And I just really remember that when I was listening to what people were doing in their lives and their leadership and the way that they're, courageous, fierce grace. They've got this resilience and strength to, hold their whānau, their communities, their colleagues, and break the mold and succeed in their own way. And I just really heard how many women are drawing the lines in our midst. And also want to just, again, come back to our logo, Te Manahua. Mana, our authentic authority, the places that we belong to, the fruits of our labour, of our generosity, steeliness and strength were mentioned. But most of all, I did hear this quiet sense of humility, to be of service, to listen to others, to give the gift of listening, to move with confidence and courage. And I really thought this wonderful quality of humility is something that gets overlooked in leadership today, but really it's an ancient quality. Socrates used to talk about humility and that his wisdom was derived from his ability to recognize the limits of his knowledge. And he used this as a starting point for genuine inquiry. Confucius really upheld the characteristic of humility. Collins and Porras, in their groundbreaking book, Good to Great, talk about level 5 leaders as people with great humility. So I really wanted to acknowledge the people who talked about humility the last couple of days and just getting on with things and doing things in such beautiful, generous ways that often we don't hear about. And also of that abundance and of giving back. And that's been mentioned in many different ways, whether it's to mentor another woman, to reach out and to give the hand of friendship in a time of need, or to take up a cause or a charity. Just so much abundance, joy, and as Theresa said, that money is energy and there's a currency, a gift-giving economy that surrounds us. So finally, just a word of reflection, to take that time after the conference, a few moments to reflect, go to your own edge and discover what's there. So I've really enjoyed listening to everyone, and my gratitude for this moment to be able to share some observations and highlights. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Dr. Spiller. Thank you so much for your insightful comments and the presentation that you just delivered to us. Thank you very much. I have now invited on the stage with me my fellow alumni and organising committee, Cassandra Judson, Helen McKinnon, 𝗦𝗲𝘀𝘀𝗀𝗀, and Lynn Bourne. Welcome, ladies. It's quite a relief to have someone else share the hot seat, but just a tiny little bit. I'm sure, you've all got some comments and reflections on the sessions that we've had over the last 2 days. So I think what I'll do, Lynn, is I might hand it over to you on your thoughts over the last 2 days. And before I do that, I just want to say to our audience, through the Slido, if you wanted to put down a word, a sentence of what your thoughts were, how you felt throughout the sessions, what you think, whatever, put it down on Slido. We'll read it out and just share in the joy. Over to you, Lynn.
Thanks, Hanlie. These 2 days, it's been really great. It was a real privilege to hear from such a wide range of women leaders sharing their journey and their expertise. I also really enjoyed the little snippets from the NZUWiL alum. Just added that little bit extra insight into women who've gone through the program before us. I also just wanted to add that I've thoroughly enjoyed being part of the organising committee. It's been really great to get to know some fellow Waikato alum in this setting, rather than just specifically in our usual work roles. And so the next time, if your university's hosting, I'd really encourage you to get involved.
Thank you, Lynn. Cassandra, I'm going to put you on the spot. If you had to choose just one favourite moment over the last 2 days, what would that be?
God. I've taken so many notes over the past couple of days, and there's been some really inspiring conversations that have been had. I probably reflect on this morning and the empowerment of this morning when Theresa and Robyn spoke about the rise of female leadership, and they highlighted the importance of the role of media in showcasing female leadership, especially in our response to the COVID-19 pandemic worldwide. Theresa reminded us, and then the Barbour sisters kind of confirmed it, that we all have a role to play in leadership, no matter whether we're a professional staff member or an academic staff member, and that it's not always the person that's out in the front, in the spotlight, who's putting themselves out there that is the only leader. It's also the people behind them that are on the ground actually getting shit done. So our power is not what one woman can achieve solo, but what a collective of us can achieve when we all come together.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cassandra. Helen, yesterday, Dr. Eva Collins spoke about a nugget, and certainly through the compassionate leadership session, she thought that she came away with a whole bag full. I'm wondering what your nugget is that you pulled from this symposium.
I found that a really difficult question because there was so much, and I guess I'm still processing it. If I can elaborate just a few things, I think it's the fact, what I get is that we're all feeling this and sharing. We've all got the same fears. We all have a lot of the same questions. I liked from the compassionate leadership that our using our actions to inspire others. And I think I liked what Karen Barbour said this morning, is that we're better together. And I think that's a strong theme that comes through. What I do is I come away from these events very much feeling inspired and invigorated and really positive, and it kind of tops up the tank to keep going. Hopefully what's been really good about this our online symposium is that we've been able to kind of cast our net wider, and that we've got not just NZUWiL Alumni, but that we've invited so many other of our colleagues in New Zealand and Australia to attend. And hopefully we're sharing the lessons, and yeah.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
𝗦𝗲𝘀𝘀𝗀𝗀, I'm going to pose the same question to you, since there's a whole bag of nuggets. Could you share for us your one?
Well, I find it really difficult to just choose one as well, because I've really enjoyed the last couple of days. The panel discussions were all great. They were all quite different. And so it is hard to pick one. But I will walk away with a real feeling of pride, actually, in the calibre of women and the calibre of women leaders that we have in our institution. So that's one of my biggest takeaways. It was really awesome to hear a lot of our women speak and have the spotlight on them. So yeah, it's a big feeling of pride for me.
Fantastic. Thank you. In 2019, the steering group sat down and we discussed having the symposium, who was going to hold it, and then I put my hand up because the University of Waikato had not yet hosted it. We talked about face-to-face, about dining and wining, and who we're going to meet and which hotels we're going to stay at. And then not a few months later, here we are in an online virtual world. I'm so proud of this team and the team in the background that's brought this together. It's been an amazing event. Helen, I'm going to hand it over to you for a couple of notes as to what our audience thought of the sessions.
Okay. And what's been really great about this is the feedback that we have had and all the questions. So thank you very much to everybody who has posed the questions throughout. I've got love the range of topics and speakers, inspirational, excellent speakers, leadership is doable, reaffirmed, and inspirational and re-energising. I really also want to say that so much of this wouldn't be possible without yourself, Hanlie. You have led us. You are inspirational. We are indebted to how well this is run. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And then I just want to say thank you to the rest of our organising committee. 𝗦𝗀𝘀𝘀𝗀𝗀, who you saw on screen yesterday, talking about breaking barriers. Dr. Eva Collins, talking about compassionate leadership. Michelle Jordan-Tong, Peter Goldsworthy, Louise Tainui, and Tricia Finn, who all made part of the organising committee to bring this to you. Thank you to C Events for the platform and the virtual room that didn't quite work today, but thank you for what you have done for us. To the ACLX team in the background, what you guys don't see is the busyness and the hustle and bustle that goes on behind the cameras. Thank you very much to each and every one of you. And then an enormous thank you to two fantastic people. I'm actually going to bring them on. They're going to hate me for it, but that's okay. Sean and Amanda, please could you come up so that we can thank you in person and people can see who's been behind the scenes. I know it's not funny. Thank you, Amanda. Without this lady, Sean, thank you. I really wanted to bring these people on stage because this could not have been possible without them. The small detail, the organising, the late nights, you guys have been absolutely fantastic. When I approached Amanda with this idea, she's like, don't you worry, we've got this. We're going to make something fantastic. And we've done it, Amanda. We have done it. Thank you so much for everything. Very good.
Thank you.
And then to our sponsors, Te Whare Wānanga o Waikato, the University of Waikato, Crown Relocation, L'Oreal, and Fisher Leadership. Without your sponsorship and your generosity, this would not have been possible. Talking about L'Oreal, we have got one more prize to give, and I'm going to hand over the final gift to Cassandra to give, and then we'll wrap up.
Drum roll, please. Our final winner is Emma Alter of Lincoln University. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Emma. We'll get that basket to you soon. And finally, to our alumni and your friends that have shared this 2 days with us, thank you for taking the time, for being patient with us while we run around trying to sort out our virtual rooms. And I leave you with this whakatauki today. Ma mua aka e kite amuri, ma muri ka ora amua. Those who lead give sight to those who follow, and those who follow give life to those who lead. Ka kite anō.
The world is a big, wonderful place, full of opportunities. No two countries are the same, and no two mobility programs are either. We know the complexities that come with moving employees and their families across borders, both for your business and your relocating employees. We can advise you on how to best develop or modify your mobility program. Whatever the size and needs of your business, we deliver a customized approach. And to simplify everything, we operate through a single point of coordination. From tailored advice to practical support, our robust knowledge of international immigration policy means you can relax. We'll assist in pre-planning, paperwork, visas, and everything else along the way. Our focus is on your compliance. Financial transparency and control are critical to every mobility program success. We can help you with both program budgeting and management of associated costs. We have a full suite of flexible mobility services to enhance all aspects of your program. Together, we can build the best international relocation experience for your employees, their families, and your business. Global in scope, human in scale.